Mrs. Doubtfire. Hello and welcome to MediumSalt, the podcast where we season nostalgic about movies and pop culture that provides a window into how we were and how we've grown as individuals and as a society. Also, we like to point out a little thing bad because it's fun and we're salty. I'm your host, Matt, joined by my good friend and co-host, Kait. Today, we are looking at the 1993 comedy Mrs. Doubtfire, starring Robin Williams and Sally Field, directed by Chris Columbus. But first, Kait, how are you?
I am actually doing very well. I'm a little tired because I woke up at 6 to watch Mrs. Doubtfire this morning. But that means that all of the salt is fresh. Fresh from the ocean.
Fresh salt.
Fresh salt.
All right. You watching any good media besides,
That is a good question. I've been kind of, because Halloween is coming up, looking into scary movies or horror movies, especially classics. I wouldn't call it good. But I did recently watch Rosemary's Baby, which was directed by Roman Polanski, which is its own podcast. It was very well made. And I enjoyed it, I think. ...
There's a huge asterisk next to that.
Yeah, that's a can of worms movie.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we're not talking about
absolutely.
that movie today, but in terms of actual good media that I've been consuming, mainly I've been playing Slay the Spire, which is a deck building video game that's really fun.
Okay.
There's no, as far as I can tell, there's no moral overtones through which to judge reality or society through. So, what about you?
So I just got finished reading The Extraordinaries by T.J. Klune. And if you haven't read anything by T.J. Klune, I do highly recommend it. Extraordinaries is just basically a gay ADHD teen falls in love with a superhero. So,
what?
It's a really fun story. I think everything by T.J. Klune just kind of reads like a nice warm hug, There's nothing too crazy about them. They're the thing about T.J. Klune is he takes these basic stories and he brings them to his an alternative audience. And by alternative audience, I just mean the gay audience, the LGBT
it's more
audience.
Like a disenfranchised audience than alternative, really.
He takes stories and he gives them to everyone, right? It's just like a big comforting gay hug.
And does he avoid the stereotypical and cliche queer tragedy elements, right? Where queer people can exist in media, but only if their lives are tragic because no one's supposed to be queer?
Oh, yeah, no, that's T.J. Klune's whole thing is being inclusive and basically telling gay stories from a gay point of view. And they're warm and fuzzy. The Extraordinaries has some sort of kind of problematic elements, depending on how you look at things. The main character's father is a police officer. And in this story, all police officers are unequivocally the good guys.
Funny, aside, for the longest time, every time I saw ACAB, I didn't know what it meant, and I thought it meant assigned cop at birth. And so, for the longest time, I'd be like, okay, that's a weird flex. And now I'm still and now in my head, I say all cops are bad, but I still don't think that's right. Is it all cops are bastards, ACAB?
Yeah, so I think the actual saying is all cops are bastards.
Okay.
But the much more friendly version of it is all cops are bad. So in The Extraordinaries, all cops are not bad.
Moral, upstanding people who don't prey on minorities and...
Yeah, which wouldn't be so bad because it is it's a comic booky kind of story. It's supposed to be fantasy and feel good, and bringing that kind of heavy into the story maybe wouldn't fit. That said, there are definitely some jokes in there that are told from a very kind of privileged white perspective, where they make a little bit of light of police brutality.
Oh, that's always fun.
Right. And it definitely sounds worse than it reads in the book, but, you know, I think he's since come out and apologized for those depictions and those jokes.
It's one of those things where, like, what level of pain are you going to have to endure whenever you consume a particular type of media, right? Like, there are certain things we're just supposed to let roll off of us, right? Like, oh, that's just whatever show. But it's okay. I really do legitimately think it's getting better. So. Yeah.
So it's a good book. I like reading it. You know, it's not to ruin anything, but it's like, you know, it's got that kind of happy ending. It's, you know, TJ Klune writes primarily romance. So, you know, it's kind of fun to take these like, oh, it's a comic booky thing, but it's written like a romance. So it kind of, the way seeing the two different structures and two different storytelling styles meld in one story is kind of fun. But another book by TJ Klune I really do recommend is House in the Cerulean Sea.
Oh, I bought that because your lovely wife recommended it immediately. Actually, I believe what she said is, you need to leave right now, and you need to go buy it, and you need to read it. But I was at your house for longer, and then I got it at the bookstore the other day. So
yes, yes, absolutely. I like to describe it as the book 2020 needed, but certainly did not deserve.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
And he just came out with a new book called Under the Whispering Door, which is kind of like on my list for next. That's the next book I'm reading.
I'm actually reading Frankenstein for work, which is interesting. There's a lot of themes in there that I want to explore. And what I didn't know is that there were two different editions of Frankenstein. There was a second, more recent edition that was edited differently to remove a lot of the feminist themes. And the basically remove a lot of the onus of responsibility from Dr. Frankenstein. So, that's interesting, I thought.
Yeah. I need to, you know, as prevalent as the Frankenstein mythos kind of is in pop culture and media, it's a story I haven't really revisited since like college.
Same. Were we in the same college English class? Do you remember?
For a semester we were, I think.
Yeah, because I remember reading it in English in college too. So
now we need to talk about a movie that I think is the definition.
Doubtfire?
I think it's the reason that we are doing this podcast. Really, like True Lies is the impetus. Like that was the film that made us need to talk.
Yeah, I railed about that movie for hours, maybe weeks. I'm still railing, actually, inside.
Yeah. Oh yeah, me too. Me too. But I think Mrs. Doubtfire exemplifies what this podcast is really about. Where, like, I'm 90s white boy, cis-het white boy, grew up in the 90s. The decade was made for me, right?
Middle class? Lower middle class?
Yeah, lower middle class. It's a very privileged position to look back at the 90s and go like, oh, that was a good time. But, you know, if you go back and you really examine what was happening in the 90s, in media and in popular culture, you start to see these patterns emerge and these behaviors and attitudes present themselves as normal that are it's definitely good that we've kind of like left those behind us. And I think Mrs. Doubtfire definitely picks up on a lot of that.
It really does.
I thought this was going to be an easy one.
I did too. I remembered really liking Mrs. Doubtfire when I was a kid, because back in the 90s, there were no streaming services. So you got to watch the 8 VHS tapes you had over and over again, right? And that's how, for a brief period during my middle school years, my favorite movie was Pretty Woman, because I had no idea what I was watching. I actually tried to take it to a sleepover once, and the other girl's mom had to be like, yeah, we're not going to do that. And I didn't understand. Yeah, I was very poorly supervised. But yeah, and then I rewatched it as an adult, and and we'll talk about it actually, because I think we might watch it next week. But yep, Pretty Woman should not be an 11-year-old girl's favorite movie.
No, that's worth examining.
It's pretty horrific, actually.
But I thought, like, we just recorded the True Lies episode, which is our pilot episode for this podcast. I don't know if it's going to be released first or what, but it was the first one we recorded. And next, we were gonna do something that I thought was going to be like on a similar level. But then I was like, no, we need like a palate cleanser. We need to do something. Let's do a Robin Williams comedy.
Yeah.
From 1993. This is like this was like perfect. It's like, yeah. So like, obviously, because there's the obvious things about this movie that like, oh yeah, it's a guy who like tricks a woman into thinking that he's a British nanny so he can hang out with his kids against the court's will and against the mother of his children's will. Mm-hmm. And like that, I thought that was going to be it. I was like, okay, like that's real quick. Like, let's just talk about how that's problematic.
Good
like,
time.
Yeah, it's still just fun, Yeah. And then, Kate, I thought this was going to be a quick and easy one.
I mean,
I really did.
Yeah.
I have 6 pages of notes.
I'm so excited.
6 pages.
Well, the idea and the public image of Robin Williams being a family-friendly actor is also really interesting because if you actually watch his early stand-up, it is very, very adult.
Oh yeah, it's super raunchy.
Yeah. So his transition into becoming the genie in Aladdin and, Patch Adams and like getting these roles where he gets to be funny for kids is really interesting.
Oh yeah. I think it all kind of started with Mork and Mindy and all that, and he became into people's homes that way. And then he wanted to leave his mark in the animation world, and he started working with Disney.
I mean, no one else could be the genie at this point. Like, that's absurd. He was perfect.
No.
But
I mean, even modern iterations of that story, they're aping Robin Williams, what Robin Williams brought to the performance. Like,
right.
Like Will Smith is always going to be Will Smith, but he's still doing the
trying to.
Genie out of time, making pop culture references like that. This is a very distinctly Robin Williams thing, And
the thing is, Robin Williams is a master of improv. He's just really good at it. Well, I say is interesting fact. This is the first Robin Williams movie I've actually let myself watch since he died. Yeah, he died.
Actually, now that you mention that, I think this is the first one I've seen since he died too.
Wow. Yeah, I've just been avoiding them. I was really devastated that he died. I think that for whatever reason, his struggle with depression and I guess I was always aware of the undercurrent of this truth, right? That the people that we find deeply funny are also deeply tragic, right? Because me personally, I use humor as a coping mechanism. It's my favorite one. And the fact that this person who brought so much joy into other people's lives was just so injured and fragile and desperate to escape this pain was just a lot. And so I had such a fondness for him. I still do, obviously, but I just couldn't do it. Like, I couldn't watch any Robin Williams movies for a really long time until now. So, because he died how long ago? It's been years, right?
Yeah, it's been a couple of years. Yeah, he died in 2014. So it's been
14?
Almost 7 years. Yeah. Yeah, he 63,
Oh, that's so sad. I sent you an article where they were actually talking about making a sequel to Mrs. Doubtfire, which is interesting.
Yeah, that could be fun to talk about after we go through the movie.
And
we talk about all of this because this is so it's 1993. This is Robin Williams hot off of 1992's Aladdin.
This was after Aladdin? Wow.
Just after. Right after. Like, pretty much, like, kind of, we're getting into the height of Robin Williams' career, really. Like, Aladdin happened and his career took off. He started to be in everything.
He was also in Hook in 91. Hook was
he was in Hook in 91, and that was good.
Mm-hmm.
I liked Hook.
I did too. We should probably watch it. There's probably
it's been a minute.
It's probably something terrible.
Honestly, I'm starting to wonder if anything from the 90s aged well.
Well, we're going to find it. So
yeah, I think we should do one where we should do at least one episode where something ages really well. We just talk about how much we love it. That would be great.
I watched Speed recently, and it was actually not too terrible. Keanu wasn't too problematic.
Hey, there's something to be said for movies that know what they are.
Yeah, I did have the whole cop thing, but
Yeah.
It was more like an action movie cop thing and not a police procedural, which is a little different. So
yeah. Well, cop things got really weird, post 2001, but that's a whole other podcast.
Yep. So, Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah, I want to talk about, I think one takeaway from this film, and I think all other films, every film ever that you ever watch, as an audience member, mm-hmm. as a critical thinker,
mm-hmm.
and I say this as someone who's worked in film and who watches a lot of films. Film writers and film directors are goddamn weirdos. All right? You should not take the way you frame your life should never be through the lens of the media you're consuming. Because these guys are fucking weirdos.
That's a hard ask, right? So in this age where we're increasingly isolated and some of our best relationships are with media, mm-hmm. it's very difficult to separate. I mean, I'm sure you've had this experience too. You were pretty much as introverted as I am when it comes to a lot of things. So when you're young, or like you don't have a good family support system or good role models, you just look to TV. Like, I have seen the effect of this on my relationships. There's certain ways that I think you're supposed to behave, and most of the time media shows the worst ones,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is a film, and this is really big in the 90s. This is a film about divorce.
Mm-hmm.
It plays an important element to the film. To the plot of the film.
Yeah.
And this happened a lot in the 90s. Like, it was in TV, it was in commercials, it was everywhere. Like, divorce and like how that affected the children of the divorce, how that affected the family unit. Like, mm-hmm. Politicians were talking about it. Divorce was a big deal in the 90s. You want to know a weird thing about that, though? The divorce rate in the 90s was not very high. It was actually going down. Like, the divorce rate in the 90s was like fairly bog standard. You know when the divorce rate was super high? The highest divorce rate we've seen? The 80s.
Well, that was going to get to my theory. At some point, as the divorce rate was increasing, especially after the 1950s and the idea of the nuclear family sort of disintegrated, as basically, I actually blame it on economic desperation, right? Capitalism became much harder to navigate. And so now we had to have two breadwinners, and you couldn't have this idyllic to some people family where, you have the wife with the apron and the dress and the roast in the oven every day or whatever, right? Those kids, the kids whose parents were like the first generation of divorce, they didn't have any resources to pull on. And so they grow up and then they make movies and commercials, and it's a huge part of their psyche, right? Because they think it's new and novel. Whereas now we're like, well, yeah, divorce, it's just everywhere. Like, there's like 17 divorces in my immediate family. So,
right. And we also have like a very different view nowadays of divorce and its relative, health for the individuals involved.
Yeah. Right? We have a very different view of marriage.
Yes, extremely different. So I just thought that was like really weird for the 90s.
Do you want to do a quick summary of the movie and then I'll do mine?
Sure. Yeah.
Or should I go first?
No, I'll do mine first. Here's my summary of Mrs. Doubtfire. Narcissists are cool as long as they're funny.
Ooh. Fucking burn. Yeah.
That's the movie. That's really what the movie's about. And I'll get into much more detail about that. But
so excited.
But Kait?
Yeah. That's going to be hard to follow. I think mine is going to be, if you are a good mom in TV or in media, you're the bad guy. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely have some
you're
thoughts
either
about that.
dead in a Disney movie or you're the bad guy. So.
Oh, man. Oh, and I've got something to say about that when we get there. Because I actually have a note specifically about like the weird relationship this movie has with Sally Field's character and like how this film views antagonism and the antagonist, right? Like in terms of a plot structure kind of point of view. So without further ado, let's like just dive into this thing.
Let's fucking do it.
Right. The first scene is we are introduced to Robin Williams' character, Daniel Hillard. Right. He is a voice actor for animation. This is in San Francisco, I believe.
Yeah. It doesn't specifically say it, but all of the architecture is just like, I'm in San Francisco. Look at these hilly streets.
It's very Full House.
Yeah. They ride a trolley at some point.
Yeah. And he's voice acting for like this Sylvester Tweety knockoff thing. It's clearly meant to be Looney Tunes, Sylvester and Tweety. And to establish that Robin Williams is a good guy, Robin Williams, Daniel takes a stand against one of the characters he's voicing smoking a cigarette. Which this was like another really big thing in the 90s. There's a huge anti-tobacco push because I think around this time, like the tobacco companies were finally like, fine, our product causes cancer.
All right, guys, it's just a little cancer.
So, but the important part of this is to establish that like Robin Williams is a,
moral, upstanding figure.
He's a good guy, registered trademark, right?
Don't worry, I'm such a nice guy. That's the right word. Nice guy.
And also, he's funny and he's quick-witted and he does fun voices. Little problematic Gandhi accent.
Oh, yeah.
But
Gandhi himself is problematic. Like having Gandhi be the face of social responsibility and activism. That is
that's a very complicated issue. That there's layers there. Yeah, that's a much heavier podcast.
Yeah, we're too weak in the arms for that right now. But yeah, you're exactly right. The introductory scene is essentially juxtaposing him against not just a morally bankrupt world that's against him, right? Like we are definitely immediately put on defense in his stand, like in his stead, right? Like we're like, oh, how dare you? And also everyone else is boring. Life is gray unless you're Robin Williams. So
yes, and this also like this is a save the cat moment. He's a good guy, and he gets he quits for his morals, and so we have now established that he is now without a job.
Correct.
Which like we can get into like the economics of voice acting and how almost none of that even makes sense. Like, why wouldn't you have the conversation about the smoking before the recording session? But like you didn't have to sign on to this gig. You knew that scene was coming. Like maybe you have that conversation with the producers beforehand so you don't get into trouble and blah, blah, blah. But that might also be establishing Daniel as maybe a little bit irresponsible. Right.
Like, I think we're supposed to take that away. We're supposed to take away that he's golden at heart, but he's difficult to work with, right? Because this is kind of leading us into the next scene where he
picks up his kids from school, right? And then we see Mara Wilson, and I love Mara Wilson.
Oh my gosh, she's even cooler now. Like, if you're not following her on Twitter, everyone go follow her right now and try to be her best friend because she's beautiful and funny and smart, and she talks all about being a child actress, and she's a beautiful human being.
Yeah. And she has like a really, like just this really cool, like framing and context of her own life. Like she really can like take that step back and analyze it from a very intelligent perspective.
She's smart as hell and she's just kick ass.
Yeah. So Mara Wilson, awesome. She's in there.
Super cute little girl.
Super cute little girl.
Possibly the best actress in the whole movie.
So he picks up his kids from school, and we find out that it's his son's birthday, but he's grounded, so he's not allowed to have a birthday party. Daniel says, "F that, we're throwing a birthday party." Which, like, as a kid watching this, I was like, "Yeah,
this is great! Party. What a fun dad!"
And as a parent in a relationship, I'm looking at this and I'm like, "Why would you do that?" That's
right.
That is horribly disrespectful.
Yep. So like this one scene immediately gives us a whole lot of context, right? His kids really love him. They are so excited to see him when he gets there, right? All three of them, which is weird, right? Like he has a teenage daughter. At this age, that teenage daughter should pretty much want nothing to do with him, right? The little girl loving him makes sense. And obviously the son loves him because he's a cool whatever bro. Did you catch the stripper lines?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so like he's like, "Oh, I've got a surprise for you." And the son is like, "A surprise for you for your birthday." And the son says, "One stripper?" And he goes, Like, Robin Williams doesn't say, don't say that, respect women. He just kind of says something dismissive. And then the son responds, 2 strippers? And Robin Williams literally goes, woo boy. And I'm like, oh, cool. All right. Let's do this in front of your 5-year-old daughter and your burgeoning into her sexuality teenage daughter.
Right.
Cool.
Right. So he has 2 daughters and whatever. He disregards the mom's wishes entirely. Miranda's wishes entirely, and throws this over the top party. Like, there's animals everywhere. There's like all the neighborhood kids are showing up, kids that aren't even like the right age to be friends with his son. And you start like, as a kid, like I think the audience is supposed to take away, it's like, oh yeah, he's a crazy, over the top, zany dad. But like now I'm looking at this, I'm going like, this guy is throwing a party for himself. This party isn't for his son. This is so that he can show how awesome he is, right? Yeah. This is over the top display of like affection is like clearly not about the relationship he has with his son.
Nope.
And we're supposed to think this is charming.
Yeah, there's also some logistical questions here, right? A, he just lost his job being a voice actor, which probably does not pay that well. He's spending a shit ton of money. There's like a pony and a flock of ducks and a rabbit and goats and cows. And my second problem with this is who the hell owns this petting zoo? Because no one is there taking care of the animals. The pony's just wandering in and out of the house. I'm like, this is horribly irresponsible, but also very expensive. And they won't just come immediately, right? Like it's not like he called the petting zoo on the way to his house. He planned to subvert his wife's expectations and goals, right? Like her will. He had to do this ahead of time. This is a man who doesn't plan anything except A, when it's for himself, and B, when it'll piss off his wife.
Yes. And he's clearly like he's he's super selfish in this. And then he like doing all this, he doesn't even take the bare minimum of organizing and taking care of the animals he brings over, which upsets the neighbor. And the neighbor has to and we're supposed to see the neighbor as like this old shrew archetype.
Absolutely. Right? She's a crone.
Like we're not supposed to think we're supposed to not like her.
Yeah. So there's a rabbit that's like wandering loose on a sidewalk in urban San Francisco, where there's lots of traffic, and the rabbit's just hopping around, and she's like trying to shoo the rabbit away from some of her plants on her front step, and there's animals everywhere. Like, it looks really bad. Yeah. But she does what? She goes up and she calls his wife. She calls his wife at work. Because
that makes sense.
Yeah. I'd also like to point out the fact that she has his wife's work number. So this is probably not the first time that this has happened, right?
Right.
Like,
well, I mean, this was like the 90s where I think people knew their neighbors.
Yeah, but like their work number, like that's a lot. Like the only reason you would need a work number is because something happened to your kids. Or
that's
like,
true. That's fair.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So, yeah, we like, how dare this woman want peace and quiet in her home at the end of a weekday?
Because the music's really loud. You know? There's animals everywhere. Yeah. Kids roaming around with no parents or adults around.
Yeah. So this just like begins to start like, we've started to paint this picture of Daniel, and he's like this kind of like selfish, and I'm going to get to narcissistic at some point. It's narcissistic sociopath, and we started to paint this picture of him, and like so, and I think this movie could be totally forgiven if these were all painted as like these are our hero's fatal flaws that he's going to need to get over, and like learn his lesson to have a transformation. Like that's his character arc. But that's not where this movie goes. That's not where this movie goes at all.
Nope.
And I'm like, just because I have some memories about this film, and I'm like, oh, it's okay, because at the end there's the courtroom scene and he gets his comeuppance, and then you get there and it's not that, but we'll get there.
Nope.
So we finally the phone call transfers us to Miranda.
Yeah, we meet Miranda for the first time.
Yeah. And this is Miranda's opening scene. This is where we establish her as a character, the things she like values and finds important. And I think this is a really good first scene.
I do. So like all we know about her before this is, oh, she's a tough mom because she grounded her son because he has bad grades. God forbid.
God forbid. Mom do mom things.
Yep.
Or parent things, I should say.
Or parent things at all. Yeah.
Yeah. So we meet Miranda. She is a businesswoman at a design firm. Like, she's a designer, but she's coded as like businesswoman, competent. She wears pantsuits. She's a modern woman of the 90s.
She's incredibly competent. She's controlling an entire room of people.
Yes. Yes, an entire room of men, I believe.
Yeah, actually, yeah. I think most of them are men.
Right? And these are all like good guy things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you look at her and she's competent, and like you could almost be like, okay, cool, this is like a modern movie. They're actually painting her in a good light.
Yeah, she's a person. She has this job that she really enjoys and is super good at, you know. She's well dressed, and she's like, I mean, she's beautiful. She's Sally Fields, right? So
right, yeah. And we established like the scene. Basically, she's you know, presenting in a room full of men. She's taking control of the situation. We do some foreshadowing of stuff that's going to happen later in the film involving Pierce Brosnan's character.
And, I wonder if we're supposed to read this coded as she's already evil because she's controlling men. Was there that undercurrent in the 90s, right? Like, oh, it's that bitch, one of those bitches that got promoted because of feminism. Right.
Well, no, this is the thing though. Like we take these good guy traits, and then the very like next half of the scene, we recontextualize them because she goes home early after the phone call, I assume. And all of a sudden she comes home to her house completely destroyed.
Can we take a step back for just a second?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I feel like they immediately weaken the view of her character as soon as her boss or something, right, comes up and talks about Stuart. Right. And as soon as he mentions Stuart, she turns into like a fainting lily, right? She's like, oh, Stuart. So like we are immediately informed that she has a weird weakness or romantic leanings for Stuart, right? Like she immediately, did you catch that? Like she's like, she's a little flirty and breathy after he talked. Right. He's like, do you know Stuart, whoever? And she's like, yeah, I know him.
Yes, yeah. You know, I didn't catch that at all. I interpret it more as like, oh, he's a big fish, right? That she needs to land as a client. And then later we find out that they have history. Right.
I realized they had history immediately from that conversation because
and maybe that's like the different, like, you know, my very male dominant perspective and your female perspective.
Absolutely.
Now, that's interesting. That's
because before she was very commanding. She had a different tone of voice. She's talking to her boss, even as she talks to him. And he's like, hey, can I talk to you for a second? Because he pulls her out of the meeting to talk about this, right? This is before the phone call happens. And he's like, hey, do you know Stuart? He's buying this mansion and he asked for you specifically. And she gets all doughy eyed. So like she was a professional, competent person until a man was mentioned. Yeah. So, but anyway, sorry. I just wanted to point that out. Oh my God, he's so handsome. But anyway, I just wanted that to be established. Like, they're like, look at this strong woman, unless there's a hot man around. Right. Yikes. Continue.
Yeah. So we recontextualize her. I guess she gets a little recontextualization with the mention of Stuart. And then a broader recontextualization when she gets home and her house is destroyed. And she becomes
the shrew.
The 90s mom stereotype, which I feel like is not like this film's fault. It was more reflective of like the broader, like kind of societal view that society took of moms as the disciplinarian, as the harsh taskmaster, you know, and the dads as the goofy fun guy.
Or goofy, fun, dumb. Right. So like you have your Everybody Loves Raymond, Deborah, and you have like all of so many TV shows where it's like, here's the immature, childish husband that the wife puts up with for some mysterious reason. And he is constantly under her thumb. And right. Like it just pervades this decade.
So we establish this kind of like career woman equals bad mom. Or like not fun mom.
Yeah.
Right? There are a few lines that definitely insinuate that like Miranda's career focus hurts her relationship with her children. And therefore she is like, quote, bad mom. Or at the very minimum, no fun mom. Which was like this common 90s trope, which like definitely was reflective of how society viewed different parental roles.
Mm-hmm. I feel like it's a backlash to women entering the career field, right?
Oh, absolutely it is. Women's place is not in the office place. Right? It's at home, taking care of the kids.
Yeah, you can't have both. You can be a good mom or a good business person.
Mm-hmm.
And
this is like reinforced later in the film when the character of Mrs. Doubtfire gets introduced.
Yep.
And I have some things to say about that. Like, we're taking a lot of time, I think, here with the introduction of both of these characters because I feel like it communicates so much about the rest of the film and where the film is going.
It absolutely does, because we need to humanize Sally Fields because they're not going to do it.
Right. Yeah, like, it's just weird. And what is bizarre is how... And maybe this was true at the time, too. Like, sometimes I wonder, like, how did my mother feel watching this film? You know? Like, how did my parents feel? Because, like, I know my family dynamic at home was very similar. My mother was the disciplinarian. My dad was kind of like, he was the traditional kind of breadwinner. You know, when he was around, it was fun times. And when he wasn't, it's because he was working. He was working. And then my mother was the one who had to actually, like, you know, discipline us and make sure we were not being complete assholes.
Right. By the time that this movie came out, my parents had already been divorced.
Okay. I did not know that.
Yeah. So they divorced when I was very young. So my mom was a single mom, which essentially Sally Fields also is. And
yeah. Yes.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah, I don't really remember what my feelings about the divorce parts were. Maybe they just felt normal. I don't know. But my mom was absolutely, I'm going to try to find a nice way to articulate this because I want to be as empathetic to her as I can now that I'm an adult and I understand so much more about how difficult the position she was in was. Yeah. But she had to be everything, right? And so she had these two kids. My little brother has special needs, so her life was automatically way harder. And even before my dad and her got divorced, he was definitely either the fun dad or at least wildly irresponsible. Like, we have a story where he stopped watching me because he wanted to take a shower. And I think I was 2 or 3. And by the time he got out of the shower, I had opened the front door and I had walked 3 or 4 blocks away. Like, I was fucking out of the house.
No, you cannot trust a 3-year-old.
No, ever. And definitely at least lock the upper deadbolts or something. But yeah, I was gone, and we lived in a really bad neighborhood. So,
oh man,
yeah, there were drug dealers, and like we were very poor. We lived in a really terrible area, and yeah, and of course it was like, oh, whatever, it's not a big deal. It is a big deal. Your 3-year-old tiny baby daughter is wandering around the streets alone, you know. But anyway, so yeah, that's definitely the dynamic my parents had, but they had already exploded. So
yeah. And speaking of exploding, this is when Daniel and Miranda's relationship explodes, or this is like the straw that breaks the camel's back. You definitely like. There's definitely the implication that the pony. There's definitely the implication that this kind of thing is a regular occurrence
all the time,
and Miranda is done dealing with it, and justifiably so.
She's in a big meeting when we meet her, and then she leaves immediately to come home. She leaves in the middle of like her work day. The kids just got out of school. School gets out at like 2 or 3. Like, it gets out way earlier than you think. And she just immediately drops everything. Like, I guess they run the rest of the meeting without her. And she's like, I'm sorry, I have to go deal with my fucking mess of a husband.
Yeah. And Daniel's all like, oh, but I was going to clean it up before you got home. There was no way that house was getting clean.
No fucking
by
way.
The end of the day. That was like a multi-day cleanup job.
And like repairs. There was literally a child hanging from the chandelier.
Oh, yeah. And you know there was just all kinds of animal droppings.
Everywhere. Especially because, like, he even makes a joke about the pony having had a lot of water. Like, the animals are just pissing and shitting all over the house.
Right. So, like, even if he cleaned it up, that house was still going to smell like a barnyard.
And they're dancing on the table. There's, like, kids wandering in and out everywhere. Like,
right, you don't fix a dented, broken table. they have the argument. Robin Williams and Daniel and Miranda have this argument, and he refuses to take responsibility. And again, this is the beginning of the movie, so like I can be really cool if this is his fatal flaw. He refuses to take responsibility, and he needs to learn that lesson by the end of the film. But again, he doesn't. He doesn't learn that lesson, and it drives me nuts. And he blames her.
He does.
He's like, well, I wouldn't have to do this if you were more fun, if you were around for the kids. And then, like, finally, Miranda drops the divorce bomb.
The D word.
And Robin Williams, like a fucking narcissist, goes into, like, then he starts to, like, panic and, like, try to, like, make things better. And then at one point he says, let's go on vacation. You're better when you're on vacation. You're better. You're better.
You're better when you're not relaxed.
You're a different person.
Yeah, remember when you used to be fun? When you weren't supporting a giant man-child? Yeah. Like, that's... And the thing is, she doesn't even object to that line. She just says our problems would be with us, like would be waiting for us when we got back.
Right. Yeah, so like, yes, I am a better person, but you know what?
Yeah, it's not that she's a better person. It's that she has less to carry. Right now, she's carrying an entire family. She's carrying, they have an enormous house, and it's beautiful, and it's in San Francisco. She clearly makes a lot of money, which probably means that she works very hard because, A, she's a woman in the 90s working in business, and... Yeah,
fairly high up at her firm, fairly well respected at her firm. You don't get that, like, even, like... Man or woman, you do not get there without a truckload of work. Yeah,
you don't get there by accident because women don't fail upwards, you know? Like she had to scrabble for every single fucking inch she got. She had to scrabble to be able to tell those men what type of coffee table to put in that room, you know? Right. So here she is having made all of these sacrifices and working so hard. And at this point, she doesn't even know he's lost his job again.
Right. She doesn't even know that yet.
Yeah. He doesn't even mention that. She just comes home to this party.
Yeah. I wonder if there's a version of the script where like that comes up too.
Oh, and like she had presents and she had a cake made that has like a little soccer ball. And like
she wasn't heartless. She wasn't going to like completely ignore her son's birthday. He effed up and he had, that was his punishment. No crazy party.
Yeah. They were still going to do presents and some sort of cake. And she clearly loves him. And like she either already had the cake picked up that day around all the other stuff she had to do, or she picked it up on the way home or something, right? Like, and the presents were wrapped. Like, yeah, she put effort into this.
Right. So we end the scene like they're getting separated.
The kids are watching or listening the whole time.
Yeah, the kids are listening the whole time because, I don't know.
They're sitting on the stairs.
Yeah. They're sitting on the stairs listening through the walls. The parents yell at each other. I think that's an image I think a lot of young children at the time and now can identify with. They can empathize with that. Daniel's kicked out of the house, and we get to meet like some of my favorite characters in the film. He's
not kicked out yet because there's a dramatic scene later where he leaves, right? So
yeah. But he does go to stay with his his gay brother, which I love. I love Uncle Frank.
I do too.
And Aunt Jack.
I have a lot of feelings about this, though.
I don't like that they called Jack Aunt Jack. I feel like that's weird.
I assume that this is a choice on his part. And the only reason I assume that is I have a lot of, friends that are gender fluid or, non-binary. And so, like, I have a couple who, like, one of my dear friends and her partner, and they're married, and he likes to be called her wifespend.
Okay.
Because
if that's how the movie wants to play it, that'd be fine. But I always got the feeling that it was supposed to be a joke. Because they're gay, and one's the man and one's the woman, because even in a gay relationship, something has to be heterosexual about it.
Yeah, I hope that's not true.
Yeah.
But I could totally see that, because there's nothing else that's forgiving about this movie.
Yeah.
So, I guess what I'm saying is, if you are a gay couple and one of you wants to be called auntie, fucking go for it. That's awesome.
Yeah. That's it. But I love Uncle Jack, and I love the dynamic, or I love Uncle Frank, and I love the dynamic that Jack and Frank have. I love I love Daniel's relationship with his brother.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's warm, it's fuzzy,
mm-hmm.
it's fun, it's non-judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Yeah.
Give me more of that.
Yeah, they clearly love each other, right?
Yes.
And, I mean, you can also tell that Frank knows who his brother is, right? Frank knows his brother's a fuck up, so... Yeah. Like, Frank clearly has this blossoming business. They do some sort of, like, theater or TV, like,
it seems like they do prosthetic makeup for film and stage.
And they're really good at it, and they work in it together, and, like, they have... There's a point where Frank, like, calls Jack a bitch or says something like that, but it's in, like, that I'm taking this word back kind of playful, like, we love each other and we goad each other kind of way. So you can kind of take that either way, right? Like, you can take that as, gay people are always catty. I don't feel that,
I don't know.
But
it feels like William Dafoe in The Boondocks.
Yeah.
But, like,
Boondock
also,
Saints.
that's a whole other fucking movie.
Yeah,
that's another podcast.
That feels more self-loathing to me than this version,
it definitely
right? Where
does.
they're just like playful. Like, I'll call my husband a jerk sometimes, right? Or a butthead or whatever, right? So yeah, we established the only healthy relationship in the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's wonderful. And I want that movie.
Yeah.
I want the Jack and Frank movie.
Yeah, we can mention this later, but it's interesting that these two characters never actually interact with the family unit.
No, they're completely separate, which...
They are. They never talk to the kids. They never see the kids. They don't go to the birthday party. They don't go to anything. Like, they're never... they only interact with Robin Williams. And I think that is its own commentary on the acceptance of... queerness in the 90s, right? Like,
I also know a lot of scenes got cut from this film. Maybe there was one in there.
I hope that they had a bigger role, but like, this definitely fills that narrative of, you know, we're not in the 80s anymore, so being gay is okay as long as you do it far away from me.
Right. Yeah. But
not in my backyard, you know?
Right. No, this film, and there was, like, I just said actually there was a lot cut from this film. This film is a very tight film. As an aside, this film is like super tight. Like every scene kind of serves a really good purpose. It's a 2-hour movie, but it does not feel like a 2-hour movie. It feels like it feels like a tight 90-minute film, and it's not. It's longer. So one thing said in this film's praise, it is really well paced. Because we go right from, like, real quick, we introduce, you know, Frank and Jack. Just as like a small little scene. You know, there's some jokes in there about, you know, about his mom offering that he could stay on their couch, whatever. And we go from there to the courtroom, which establishes the rules for the rest of the movie. He has 90 days to get his life together, and he'll get to see his kids more. But until then, he does not get to see his kids except for once a week. Yeah.
Also, sorry to step back again, but it's interesting that he has the same relationship with his mom that he has with his wife.
Explain.
So his mom is talking on the phone to his brother, Frank. He doesn't want to talk to his mom. Now he's experiencing this serious thing. He's saying, no, I don't want to talk to you. No, I don't want to come sleep on your couch, right? Tell her I'm not here. Tell her I don't want to talk, whatever. Like and his mom on the phone is made to sound naggy, like the final evolution of what his wife would become. Right? She's like the overbearing, but tell him that I'm whatever, and how is he doing? Like, she's actually just being a caring mom who's calling to check on her son who's getting divorced. But instead, she's treated like a nuisance.
Right.
Just like his fucking wife.
Further illustrating Daniel's inability to handle any of the women in his life. Actually, further on, when we get to later, I'm going to talk about how his life, the movie portrays that his life is basically controlled and ruled by humorless women. And which is his greatest weakness because he's a man and humor is his weapon. So the fact that his wife is controlled by humorless women is an interesting point of fact. So we go to the courtroom. We establish the rules of the rest of the movie, 90 days, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Which we should say is very generous. Like, courts don't do that. Yeah. That's not a thing. You have nowhere to live and you have no job. You don't get kids, right? Like, what are you going to do? Have fun with him in the dumpster outside the Chinese restaurant?
White male. He can do whatever he wants. Middle-aged white men were the superheroes of the 90s. They could do whatever they wanted.
Yeah, just give him 6 months and he'll be a CEO by accident.
Yeah. In the 90s, we were all Jeff Bezos. So, like, we finish the court scene, establish the rules. He goes and gets the last of his stuff from Miranda's house.
Right. Also, in the court scene, we have the first, "Oh, but I'm a father and I can't live without my children.
Yeah.
What? I will die immediately. Blah, blah, blah."
Yeah, and that's the weird thing. Like, his relationship with his children is always framed in, like, his need for his children. We are never, except for one instance, we never actually see anything about the role that he fills in his children's life. Like, at no point do we establish that his children need him. It is only ever that he needs his children. It's
actually the opposite. Like, they start to thrive when he's allegedly not there.
Right. The only time we see anything about the needs of the children is Mara Wilson's character, who likes it when her dad reads her stories. That's the only need that we see Daniel fulfilling.
Right.
Everything else is about how Daniel feels.
When Mrs. Doubtfire reads to her, right? And Mrs. Doubtfire can't do the weird voices because then she'll know it's her dad. So she just likes being read to, which means her mom's probably too fucking busy raising enough money for that house and 3 kids in San Francisco to be able to do that at night, right?
Yeah. And the mother-in-law is a shrew. That's established.
Oh, it is, yes. So
yeah. Really brief blink and you miss it. And the mother-in-law fills every mother-in-law trope you've ever seen.
Yeah. It's true. She's just standing on the steps when he gets his stuff. So yeah, you're right. Right now, we have no good female characters.
None. No. Like, Miranda was almost there.
Yeah, they're all evil or shrewish.
We'll get this out of the way. This movie does not pass the Bechdel test.
You know what? At the beginning, Sally Fields is talking to people about work. But they're all men?
They're all men.
Yeah. Fuck.
She has
And
no
every
friends.
time she talks to Mrs. Doubtfire, it's about a man.
It's usually about Daniel.
Yeah. Or Stuart.
Yeah, or Stuart. But it's always like, it's always about Daniel or Stuart. And it's always, whenever it's about Daniel, it's always forgiving all of his flaws. Whenever it's about Stuart, it's making up flaws about Stuart. So we're at the scene where he gets all his stuff. We get the mother-in-law trope. The court liaison, he has his little court liaison bit where he meets Mrs. Sellner, who's another humorless woman. And this woman has literal control over his future. But she only has like 2 scenes, and then we never see her again.
Which is a bummer, because she's a cool
It is a bummer.
character.
She's a good character. And I think played well off of like her straight-laced, like straight, like quote, straight man performance. Played really well against Robin Williams' character.
Yeah. Because it's not that she's humorless, it's that she has no time for his bullshit.
Yeah, she's busy.
Right. Like, this is not the time to be funny. This is talking about your children's welfare. Like, I don't care how well you can make voices. And I don't know why you decided to take up my time by making, because at some point he goes on like a tirade of like 40 different impressions of stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the scene's really purpose, is just to give Robin Williams a scene to do Robin Williams shit. And for us to like just laugh because Robin Williams is a funny, charming guy. And
then she immediately dismantles him at the end by saying, "Do you think you're humorous?"
Yeah.
Or do you find
and of course
humorous?
he has to end it with a quip. It's like, well, I used to.
But like, you proved me wrong today or something. Like,
right. Yeah. I was like,
it's not fucking all about you. I have 14 other shitty dads to see today. You know?
Yeah. Some worse, some better than you. So that was, courtroom bit, humorless women, control his life, and he just cannot handle it. He has to try to make Miss Sellner laugh, and he cannot because it is outside of his power. He lacks empathy for the women in his life, which would be great if that was the arc that we were going on in this movie, but it's not. Yeah. It's not.
It's not. Yeah, women are only served to be his audience at this point, right? Like his audience, or I guess to give him more audience in his wife's case, because she gave him a tiny captive audience, and that's the thing that he values about his marriage. Because you notice he's not like he doesn't miss her. He never talks about how much he wants her back. He just wants his life and his kids back, right? And his life being a super cushy life where he can hop between jobs and have these morals that are more important than his family. And
all of this would be fine if this was all painted as a flaw, but it's not. This is painted as endearing and charming and like not something he has to solve. Yeah. Like the flaws that he's supposed to have is that he's like messy and like a little irresponsible in the way that most humans are irresponsible. But the thing is like he's irresponsible in the way most humans are not irresponsible. But we move on and we meet Pierce Brosnan's character, James. Stuart. Yes. Stuart. Yeah. Why do I think his name is James? Probably because he's going to play James Bond in a couple of years. Ooh. Fun story. This is actually this role that probably got him James Bond.
What?
Yeah. So this was before, like, Goldeneye was the first time Brosnan was James Bond. I know he impressed Chris Columbus. Wow. With this role that he played in this film. And later on, Chris Columbus recommended Brosnan for Bond when they were casting a new Bond for Goldeneye.
Wow, that's really cool.
So that's your Mrs. Doubtfire James Bond connection.
Yeah. I want it to be said that I think Stuart is a really good guy with one exception. Can I say my exception?
Oh, I want to hear your exception.
Yeah. So my exception is that, so for most of the time that we see Stuart, he's being a pretty stand-up dude, right? But the very first time we're introduced to him is when he comes into the office to talk to Miranda about the mansion, right? Like he bought this like 1800s mansion. And so I firmly believe that he only bought this mansion to contrive a reason to see Miranda. And so he comes into her office. She has all of this work done, right? Like she's got sketches up on the what are those things? Easels, whatever, like the little stands. Easels on the boards, and then there's like presentations. Paper all over the table. And she's talking about all of her ideas for how to restore and like refurbish and furnish this beautiful old house. And she's clearly put like a lot of thought and work into this, right? Like she's got the themes down and she's talking about draperies. And he's like, all he's doing is
flirting with her.
Yes,
he's just hitting on her the whole time.
He's like, oh, I just have never stopped thinking about you. And I love wasting your time during the workday, and you're supposed to be incredibly flattered by this, instead of like, well, when are we actually going to get this work done? Like, do you still want this house decorated? Yeah.
Miranda is a consummate professional throughout the whole thing. Like she's being hit on nonstop. She probably deals with this on a regular basis.
She probably
as a woman
does.
In power in industry.
Yeah,
and she just keeps going.
She does.
Because Miranda is the real MVP.
She is. Yeah. So it's clear that he's very interested in her. We're supposed to think it's really sweet that he's done this. I think it's creepy. I think he should have been like, hey, let's talk about all this. And then maybe at the end I can ask you for lunch or whatever, right? Like be a human being. But instead he flirts with her and then he just gets up and leaves.
Right. And he's like, oh, you're not interested in the flirting. So I've got other good things to do.
Okay, bye.
Well, the fun thing is like in an earlier one of the drafts of the script, he was the antagonist of the film. It wasn't going to be like, he wasn't supposed to be a stand-up guy, at least in one of the early drafts. He was supposed to be, the villain. Like he had plans to get rid of the kids and send them off to boarding school.
Oh, snap.
And like he was going to seduce Miranda because Miranda has no agency in that version of the script, which to this film's credit, like at least Miranda has agency and she's a woman. She knows what she wants.
Right.
And she is unapologetic about it. And I do love that about this film. Well, till the end where I have major problems with the end of this movie.
I'm going to push back a little bit on that because essentially, so she's just gone through or is going through this really bad divorce, right? And Stuart comes into her life and starts putting a lot of pressure on her, right? Like he is forcing her to interact with him by being a client of hers. So she can't get away from him. And when she does talk to him, all he talks about is her. And it's also worth noting that when he flirts with her for most of this time, he doesn't realize she's divorced. So at some point, he knew she was married and he was still pursuing her randomly. And I feel like the speed at which their relationship progresses is a little bit manipulative, only because she's reeling from a 15-year marriage.
It does seem really rapid.
Yeah.
Because if you were to really go through this film, like, beat by beat, and you tried to figure out a time frame, you only have, like, 2 Fridays in there.
Yeah. Or
2 Saturdays, or whatever the day was. Yeah.
Like, the timeline is definitely messed up, but it's definitely less than a month or 2, right? Because by the time they go back to the court and he's all weird.
Yeah, it's early. It's pre-90 days.
Yes, so, it is before 3 months and at least somewhere between 2 weeks and 3 months, right?
Yeah. So the way I look at it is I think what happened was there was an early version of the script where Pierce Brosnan's character, Stuart, was much more villainous. Mm-hmm. And they just kind of like, when they rewrote it to make him to be more empathetic to his character, they probably kept some of the stuff that was like borderline, or at least considered borderline at the time.
I don't know if it would be I feel like that is a very standard romantic comedy sort of thing. Yeah. Right.
Okay. So maybe it'd be borderline now, but it shouldn't be.
It's definitely borderline now. But the whole romantic overtures and I chased you down in an airport, or I've been following you in the grocery store. How romantic am I? You're not romantic. You're a fucking creepy stalker. Do not follow women around and do not harass them in their workplace. Do not do it. I don't care how hot your waitress is.
15 years after you've known this lady, you're still
you haven't seen or talked to her in 15 years. And now you're like, okay, remember that person that I used to like? And I guess she's still around and she's actually doing really well at her job. Maybe I should go ruin that somehow.
Yeah.
I also want to point out at this point, because it's not something that I considered the first time that I watched this movie, Miranda is incredibly isolated. She has no friends. She doesn't have a good relationship with her children. She barely has a relationship with her mom, I guess, right? Like, we see her mom in a 10-second scene, and we never see her again. She's been in this 15-year marriage with this man who doesn't listen to her or talk about anything serious. Clearly, they don't have a good sex life. So she has nothing but work and what she wishes was her family. Yeah. And that's where we have her. So it's very easy right now to come in and be anything and still get her attention. Because even though she doesn't have a good relationship with her husband, he's still the familiar thing that when is gone, there is a hole, right? So she's feeling these feelings of failure. Her marriage has failed, right? Like she even talked about, it started going bad almost immediately, because that's what happens when you marry a narcissist who doesn't take anything seriously. But they still had 3 kids pretty far apart, right? Like his youngest daughter,
all together.
His youngest daughter is 5 and his oldest daughter is 15 or 16? Yeah. So maybe she was even an attempt to save the marriage or something, right?
Right.
And she did all this while having a career. She had 3 kids.
And
she went through 3 pregnancies.
While he couldn't even hold down a voice acting gig.
Right. And she looks fantastic. Clearly the woman also makes time to hit the gym because she looks great. But anyway, so she's incredibly isolated and very vulnerable right now. And then this man swoops in.
Yep.
So continue.
And that's problematic. And it's again, I think this is one of those situations of art, kind of reflecting society at the time, where this is considered romantic, and probably even now this would be considered romantic, but it really, 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 really shouldn't be.
Right. What should have happened? What should have happened is she should have said, "Hey, I'm going through a really bad divorce, and I've been married for 15 years. I need to take a year off. Can we just table this and revisit it in a year when I've had some therapy and I've reconnected with my children?"
Yeah. That absolutely needed to happen. And we go from there, and we go to Robin Williams' Daniel's apartment, right? His apartment, and it's the stereotypical bachelor mess. He can't clean anything. He's hopeless. The kids are eating Chinese takeout. It's awful. He can't even cook.
Giant man-child.
Yeah, giant man-child.
Also, where's he getting his money? It's a nice apartment, actually. Even though it's messy, right? There's this beautiful bay window. I think it's supposed to be a not nice apartment. Because it's in a kind of when you see it later, it's in this kind of shady part of town. But it's on top of a bakery. That it probably smells great all the time.
I mean, it probably does. It's probably really nice. And But we're also looking at this like from the lens of millennials, where we have to pay like $2,000 for a studio apartment somewhere not fun.
I sure wish I could have a shed.
Yeah, where like this was in the 90s, they were like basically just giving those away.
Yeah.
So like I don't know, like I think that's definitely like our lens kind of distorting it.
It's probably true.
It's a 1-bedroom apartment with a bathroom and a kitchen. You know?
Yeah, I feel like there's 2 bedrooms, but yeah, that's fair. I could also
there might be 2 bedrooms. Yeah,
I could fucks with that apartment. It looks great. Like,
I mean, you kidding? It's San Francisco this time. This is also like this is also the era that gave us Friends. You know? And
the
rent
mysterious,
control. You know?
the mysterious rent controlled apartment that goes through 14 different layers to get to. Yeah, God forbid you give people affordable housing. Anyway,
but in this scene, we further establish Miranda as the antagonist and the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
Because she comes early to pick up the kids. And apparently she came late to drop off the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know how I feel about this scene.
It's hard.
Because, like, everyone's an ass. Like, this is everyone's the asshole situation.
Everyone is the asshole, yeah.
The way that he responds to this situation is not healthy or good for his children. And also the way Miranda's handling this situation is not healthy or good. If more empathizable because she's a busy woman who has to do all of the things now, right? And he clearly does nothing because he has no job. He has nothing.
Yeah, so like she drives up and she honks, right? So they're up having dinner and they're having like some hard conversations and he's making some jokes and trying to make the kids laugh. And they laugh because, their dad's a clown and they're eating shitty Chinese food. And she honks and he says... Oh, and then like I think it's little Natty that says, "Oh, mom's here."
Yeah, and then he says like, "You're my goddamn kids too."
Well, first he
has an emotional outburst.
Yeah. Well, first he says you don't have to go when your mom honks or something, and then later he does like they try to get up because I think she honks again. So she's downstairs in a busy San Francisco area, right? Like she probably can't find parking, and they're all just sitting around. It's not like they're having a super great time, right? They're sitting and eating Chinese food, not even on plates. So
right.
And then you're right. He yells. He says, "You're my goddamn kids too." And all of the kids get really quiet and they look scared.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like, oh, this is like we don't futz with dad when he gets serious like this. Right?
Which kind of tells me this has happened before.
Right. Like
right?
Just really weird, uncomfortable relationships.
Yeah, like he only has 2 modes, super angry or making jokes, which is terrifying.
Like Daniel's a man who needs therapy. He needs to work through some shit.
Yeah.
Like there's something going on in his life that he never grew up. Peter Pan.
He does have Peter Pan syndrome. Yeah.
Which is funny because he just played Hook.
Yeah,
he just played Peter Pan and Hook.
Well, that's how they knew he'd be so good at this role.
Yeah. So Miranda comes up.
She lets herself in too.
Yeah,
like
she lets herself
bursts into the door,
which is a bit much.
Not great.
Yeah. And then we establish like this is the rest of the film, right? We establish that she's looking for outside help. She has an ad. He manipulates Miranda into showing him the ad
by basically forcing her and saying,
he forces her, like,
I'm their dad.
I have a right. Yeah. Like this is very kind of narcissistic gaslighty behavior. It's sociopathic. It's weird. But we're supposed to think it's like he's charming.
Clever.
Remember? He's charming. He's the fun dad.
He's so charming.
Yeah. And then he changes the number on the ad. Manipulation.
And then he begins his kind of terrorist plot.
Yeah, he begins his plot. This is his decision. We are now into Act 2. Like this is the fun and games, but also this is the journey we are now going on.
Yeah, and it's weird because he concocted this plot in 30 seconds.
Right.
Like this is how his mind works. He's a fucking sociopath. He's like, I know exactly what I'm going to do.
Yep. And it's clear that he didn't think it all the way through, but he had a plan. He had a much bigger plan.
Yeah, he's not a good planner of details. Yeah. Right.
And this is when we get into he starts using his talent as a voice actor to pretend to be all these different terrible nannies.
Right.
And this is just another scene where Robin Williams gets to be Robin Williams. This is like another improv scene. There's a few of these throughout the film. right? There's the scene with Miss Sellner. Now there's this scene where he gets to play a bunch of different characters and be Robin Williams and be funny. And like funny is charming. But when you break it down, it's like, this is really messed up. And also, one of the characters he pretends to be is a trans woman.
Yep.
Which is played as disqualifying.
It's not only disqualifying, it's a trans woman who hates men.
Right. Like I don't take care of the males because I used to be one.
Yeah. So we're immediately supposed to be like, oh, this is terrible. And
right.
Also,
this is awful and awkward. And Miranda is transphobic.
Yeah. There's like this underlying idea that if you're a trans woman, it's because you hate all men.
Right.
Like,
and you shouldn't be
like
around kids.
And you shouldn't be around kids, which also comes up later, which I'm sure we will get to.
Yeah. That comes up. Oh my gosh.
My God. Yeah.
So like.
But he's harassing her, and it's not all at once, right? Like
he's calling her over time.
Over a period of time, different.
She's exhausted by the end of it.
Yeah, she's in bed sometimes. I think he calls her at work once or twice. Like, he is doing that. Like, this has become a thing, and he's harassing her. There's no other way to describe it, right? And removing her agency for hiring someone.
Yeah. And so finally he goes to his killing stroke. This is when he becomes Euphigenia Doubtfire. And he calls and becomes this perfect British nanny. And like immediately Miranda's smitten. But when Miranda asks for her name, we find out that Daniel never even thought of a name.
I know.
For this character. He's like, Homer Simpson.
Yeah, it was the classic.
He pulls up a newspaper. He's like, Doubtfire, dear. Like, fireman Doubtfire, blah, blah, blah. Like,
police Doubtfire was caused by something or other, yeah.
Yeah, like Looney Tune shit.
Right. The whole classic, let me think of a name from 2 words I can see.
Right. So he has, and then all of a sudden, like, now Mrs. Doubtfire has to meet Miranda. So then we go back to Gay Bros. And like we have to have another Robin Williams scene where he pretends to be a bunch of different characters while they put on prosthetics and do the whole thing.
Some of them deeply
problematic. A little
problematic.
bit of casual 90s racism, you know, with like the first character he plays is like a Cuban woman.
Or a woman who's dating a Cuban man, or not dating maybe, but having sex with a Cuban man.
Right. And like,
also, they're all misogynistic. Like they are, none of these are real women. Like they're all deeply characters of stereotypes of women.
And that was one thing I meant to mention is like all of the character he's playing for the caretaker role, for taking care of children, they're all women. Every single one of the characters he's playing are women. There are no male nannies.
Yeah. I
think is probably still a thing we probably look at today. Like it's just this weird like sexism thing, like men can't take care of children.
Well, all men are child molesters, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And especially gay ones. Like it's just really weird. I mean, and I'm sure you faced this as a father, right? Like, how many times have people told you, are you babysitting? I'm like, I'm not babysitting. This is my child.
Yeah, no, I'm dadding.
Yeah, I'm being a parent. Fuck off.
Yeah.
But it falls really well into the societal idea that men are immature at this point and only women can do things that are important, like taking care of children. Yeah. Well, important in quotes. I'm air quoting for people who can't see me, which is everyone that's listening to this.
So he goes to Gay Bros, and we do the big makeover scene. It's another Robin Williams scene. He gets to play a bunch of different characters, which of course doesn't make sense because he's already established the character in the phone call. But like that's really nitpicky, and takes away the fun of the scene. So like I'll allow it, you know. Finally, we end up with Mrs. Doubtfire. But the weird thing is like this establishes his brother and his brother's partner as like entirely complicit. Complicit
in this entire idea. There's no objection at all.
Which is clearly like a criminal, awful thing. Like this is not something a healthy human being does.
No.
And his brothers are just like, we get to make you a woman. This is great.
Right. So clearly Frank has always wanted to do this to his brother.
Right.
Maybe since they were kids or something. And he's like, I just want to turn you into a lady. But now he gets his chance, I guess.
Just like, oh man. So we finally we have Mrs. Doubtfire, and we have the big reveal where he's meeting Miranda. And it's like, Mrs. Doubtfire. It's like this big hero moment. We are now firmly in Act 2. The hero is on his journey. And it does not take long for Daniel to start chastising his family, but then he also chastises Miranda.
Yep.
Further cementing like the dominant male role in the family, even though he's disguised as a woman.
Yeah, he immediately becomes the expert on everything.
Yes, he's like, oh, I don't think you should talk bad about the father in front of the children, dear.
And she takes
Surely
it. She takes the chastisement.
Yes. He establishes like weird dominance right away. And it's just, it's icky.
Yeah, and he uses the things that he already knows about his children to win over their trust immediately, right? Like you mentioned Stuart Little to his youngest daughter. All of a sudden, he was a championship world-winning European soccer player or whatever in college.
She played European football in college.
And the only one he couldn't connect with in that way immediately was Lydia, the oldest daughter.
I found that interaction really weird. It was uncomfortable. I didn't like that immediately he was chastising all of them. Like, you all didn't realize how great I was. Again, just more narcissistic personalities.
Yeah, like look what I can do. I'm still me, right? Like he has this idea that this is still him getting the accolades just secretly.
Yes. Again, Hollywood writers anyone writing any media, they're fucking weirdos.
Well, the not weird stuff doesn't get made. So
the not weird stuff doesn't get made. They don't get successful. Also, like if we're super famous later down the line, don't listen to us either. We're fucking weirdos.
It's true. I'm very strange.
Like, don't fucking listen to me. I'm not a fucking barometer for morality.
I am.
Yeah, you might be.
No, I'm not.
So finally, like they talk. Doubtfire and Mrs. Doubtfire and Miranda talk, and they establish a rapport, and she like does all these things like, oh, you know, the children got to eat good meals and they got to do their homework and blah, blah, blah. All the stuff he should have been doing as their goddamn father.
Yeah. So we've established that he could have done this all along. In this scene, he makes her a cup of tea, and that's the nicest thing he's done for his wife in probably 15 years.
It's the nicest thing he's done for his movie in the entire goddamn movie.
Right. Yeah. And so, like, the idea that all along he had these skills or this, like, he knew what was right to do, right? Like, that's what he's doing. He's manipulating someone with something that he knew he should have been doing all along.
Yeah, he knew he was supposed to be a good person, but he decided not to be because it wasn't fun.
Right. Or he's like, well, this isn't important. I don't want to put this effort into it because it's not about me. I don't know.
Yeah, which, again, would have been amazing if that was the character arc that Robin Williams was supposed to go on. Like, if he was supposed to learn lessons from this would have been really fucking good. And, like, I would say that this film is ripe for, like, a remake that, like, took a more modern approach to it and had that character arc in that lesson. But I also firmly believe that this movie doesn't work without Robin Williams.
Yeah.
And his improv and his just like the energy that he brings to the screen. This movie just doesn't work without that. In fact, it's the only thing that this movie works with.
Yeah, you cannot accept the absurdism of this plot if you don't have someone equally absurd. So like maybe
Agreed.
Chris Rock could do it.
Maybe. It's hard for me to think of like a good improv actor nowadays because improv just isn't as popular as it used to be.
It's just not the form of humor that we kind of appreciate right now.
No, it's not. It really isn't. I'm sure there's great improv artists out there, but none of them have made it huge. You know?
Bo Burnham, he used to do improv. I love Bo Burnham, but anyway.
Bo Burnham is the voice of the young millennial elder Gen Z. You know, he's the guy who went viral and then had the intelligence to analyze it, but that's something else entirely. So we finish this meeting with Mrs. Doubtfire and Miranda, and he is on his way home. When we are introduced to the bus driver.
Why did they put this in this movie? Why? What purpose did this serve?
The joke, of course, the joke is like, oh, the man is hitting on a woman who's actually another man. And he doesn't know.
I feel like that's part of the joke.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's meant to be a joke, but I also feel like this is like, well, at this time and always, older women are not represented in media. for the first thing. Unless you live in Britain where they actually respect older women. If an alien civilization invaded us and only figured out our society based on the media that they could find, like our DVDs or our radio broadcasts or whatever.
Women don't exist after 40.
Yeah, they would think every woman died the day they turned 40. And then, but for some reason, the males of our species live 3 times longer because, you can be a 90-year-old raisin and still marry a 20-year-old. Anyway, and 2, if you were a woman, your value is sex. And it doesn't matter how old you are, you're never safe from being sexually accosted, which is really disappointing.
Yes. Which I feel like was like a huge missed opportunity with this bus driver character, where, maybe Daniel has to like empathize a little bit with a feminine point of view, and like he gets hit on when all he's trying to do is go home.
On the bus, and he just had a really long day.
He's had a really long day.
He's been wearing high heels for the first time for hours. His feet are aching because this is a large man wearing high heels. Yeah. Where he got high heels in his size, let's not even talk about it.
But can't even go home without getting hit on by the bus driver, the person who he has to rely on to get him home. Yeah, and he does look uncomfortable, right? Like it's clear that this is not a good interaction for him. Yes. But it doesn't get internalized at all, especially because of the fucking pool scene, which we will get to. Yeah. And of course the movie like doesn't play it this way. The movie plays it as like it's just a funny moment, and the bus driver is just this cute old man. It's like, no, he's not a cute old man. He's a creep. Yeah, she gets onto the bus, he immediately ogles her breasts. And then I think he says something like, "Oh, you're a big girl," or something, right? Like, doesn't he say something like that? Yeah. Because it's fucking Robin Williams dressed as an old lady. Right, yeah. And he just makes all these weirdly inappropriate comments and pays way too much attention to her. Yep. And he still sits in the front of the bus, and I maintain it's because his feet still hurt worse than the sexual harassment does at this point. And speaking of his feet, he gets home and we have the throwaway heels joke, right? Like we have like, if I ever get my hands on the son of a bitch who invented heels, which again, it's a wasted moment. It's a moment for him to empathize, which like it's not. He never at any point empathizes with anyone other than himself, and he just like it's all about the damage done to him, and that's when he runs into the one of the humorless women who rules his life, Mrs. Sellner. Because he forgot his fucking appointment. Right. So the social worker shows up. What's her name again? Mrs. Sellner. Oh, Mrs. Sellner. She shows up at his apartment. Surprise! Like, oh, you got an inspection. And he tries to play it off, but Mrs. Sellner is insistent because she's a consummate professional. Daniel's weakness. And his kryptonite. That's his kryptonite. Paperwork. Yeah. So she comes up, and then we have the classic comedy bit where one person pretends to be 2 people. And I wonder how common that bit was. Because, like, obviously, I remember it being all over the place, but I wonder how much of it has to do with this movie. I don't know. It's really weird. It's played well. It didn't age great, but comedies in general don't age well. This is fair. Like comedies don't age well, but at the same time, given that, this movie's okay. There's an interesting duality here. Yeah. Of him playing himself and this older woman and trying to like basically have a conversation with himself almost. Right. So when he's Mrs. Doubtfire, he comes in and tries to blame the mess on himself, which is apparently his older sister. Right, yeah. Nothing's ever Daniel's fault. No, of course not. Oh, yeah. I'm just leaving stuff all over the place while I visit my brother in this small apartment for some reason. Right. And you have to know, again, if he was just on this fucking journey that he should have been on, you could have the conversation like, oh, he just moved in. He's trying to get his life fucking together. Right. It's okay for him to be a little human. Yeah. And also, if he could just admit his own humanity, I bet that would go a lot fucking further with the courts. Right. But in this fictionalized version of the courts, not real courts. Yeah. So also in this scene, so this is at least a week after the court date. He had enough time
to harass his wife by calling her a million times and spend at least an entire day, at least, getting all of those like costumes put on or whatever and doing all of that acting.
He spent a Saturday with his kids.
And he spent, well, at least maybe, I guess it was a whole Saturday. And he couldn't have cleaned his apartment or done any of the things he was supposed to do to actually get his kids because he doesn't actually care about that.
Yeah.
He cares about the ownership aspect of family and not having a family. Does that like not being in a family?
Yeah. He knows what he needs to do, and this is important to him. At least that's what he says. And like,
but he does the opposite of what he should do, right? Like he does something that he even knows. I think he even mentions it at some point. Like if you know, I'm going to have to see them behind plate glass if they ever catch me. I can't remember what part of the movie he mentions that.
It's when his son and Lydia discover
him. Okay, well, we'll get there because that's a whole thing.
Yeah, I keep forgetting what's nuts is like how unimportant his son is to the movie that I don't remember.
It's Chris.
The character's name. Chris. And then,
I only remember because I was trying to read the birthday cake.
Yeah, and I remember Lydia's character because they use her character's name a lot, and then I just think of. I think of like, was it Natalie? I just think of her as Meryl.
Yeah, it's Natty. What's interesting is when Mrs. Doubtfire gets introduced to the kids, she's introduced as Lydia and he immediately starts calling her Liddy. And I was like, that should have been a huge sign. Like, mess that up.
Like, how dare you, a stranger, call me by the nickname that my dad used for me?
And the rest of the family, like her little sister calls her Liddy.
Yeah. It's very intimate. It's a very intimate way to refer to somebody, you know?
Yeah. I don't know if it's just like my own personal trauma or journey or whatever, but I'm very sensitive to people like assumed comfort or assumed what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, assumed familiarity. That's what I was looking for. Where like you meet someone, this happens a lot with men. They immediately start calling you pet names or like,
oh, weird.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I guess you haven't had this experience. Don't ever date men.
No, I mean, that's not something like, I've ever had to deal with.
That's an immediate red flag.
I say that. Except in like weird corporate environments where like weird middle managers try to establish dominance. Corporate culture is fucking weird.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm a stay-at-home dad now.
It's what would happen if we gave chimps business suits. And
yeah, absolutely.
Blackberries. Yeah. So it's an uncomfortable display of force that takes something from you. That's what this sort of forced familiarity does. You immediately put someone off guard or put them in a decision-making state where they either have to decide they're okay with it or decide it's important enough to fight back against, right? Like, oh, honey, or hey, babe. I'm like, I don't know you at all. You cannot call me babe. I'm not your babe. Fuck you. Yeah, but it's hard, right? Because you're fighting all these internal things like, well, I'm a woman. I'm supposed to be demure. If I'm not demure, no one will like me because I only have two choices. I have the demure virgin, and I have the fucking shrew. So, yeah, I'm leaning into my crone phase. Personally, I'm speeding rapidly towards the crone, and it's amazing because it's the strongest form of womanhood. So,
yeah, I mean, my favorite Terry Pratchett character is Granny Weatherwax, who's like the archetype of the crone.
But awesome.
Yeah, I mean, witches are awesome.
This is true, but they're made to be the bad guys, even though it's like no.
Yeah. I highly recommend, maybe some other time I'll bring up Terry Pratchett books, but I highly recommend any of the Witches books by Terry Pratchett.
Awesome.
Fantastic. The incredible empathy that Terry Pratchett as a writer has for all of humankind got me through some really hard times.
I'm going to have to read them. That sounds amazing.
When he passed, it was actually really hard for me.
That's good. I feel that way about Ursula K. Le Guin. I found out she died and I was just devastated.
Yeah. I have a hard time reading his last book, The Shepherd's Crown, because he knew he had Alzheimer's. He knew he was going.
Oh, no.
So like that last book is all about death and all about his death in particular. And like trying to like make his readers like even in his final book, he was trying to comfort his readers.
Oh, I'm actually getting like a little teary-eyed.
Oh,
like
highly recommend. I have almost all of Discworld. You're welcome to read them at any time.
I have such a strong fondness for Terry Pratchett, despite never having read one of his books, which is interesting. Like, I've read quotes from him.
Oh man, he's such an incredible human being.
Yeah, and you feel the empathy coming through the pages, and the humility, I think, is a big part of it too. Like, he doesn't speak from a place of being an expert. He speaks from a place of having been in the mud, you know?
Right.
So
yeah, he's human and he loves humans.
Yeah. But anyway,
back to Mrs. Doubtfire.
Forced familiarity. Yeah, I've actually had a person who was a really, really old friend of mine that I knew from school, like elementary school, who I reconnected with at some point. And we were not in any sort of like romantic, excuse me. We were not in any sort of romantic sort of situation. We were just friends who were chatting, and he kept calling me. Oh God, I can't even remember what it was. Was it Sweetie? It was some sort of saccharine pet name. And because he was my friend and not just a rando I was trying to date, I tried to actually have the conversation with him where I said, you know what? I'm actually really uncomfortable with this. Can you please just not call me this? And he said, no. He said, I can call you whatever I want.
Oh, so, well, then you don't need to talk to him ever.
I did not anymore. I was like, you are a horrible person, and I will maintain that to this day. And I have not seen him since or talked to him. But yeah, that's the thing that happens.
That really sucks. I'm so sorry.
I'm just letting you know that, like, because you've never experienced it. It is absolutely a thing. It is a control thing.
I've never experienced it. Being, cis het white male is kind of the tits. But I do empathize.
Tits are meaning birds in this point. You're a bird. Yeah. Lots of birds, small ones.
Sorry, I don't mean to be offensive.
I don't know that it is offensive because tits are great.
I mean, I think everyone should appreciate those.
Yeah, they are.
That's from a very
strength.
cis het white male's perspective. So
that's from a bisexual, loves women, and doesn't know why she ever dates men perspective. Tits are great. Thumbs up.
Mm-hmm.
We're editing all of this out.
To get back to Mrs. Doubtfire, we're talking about his surprise Mrs. Sellner, classic comedy bit where he tries to be both characters at once, but you only ever seen one at one time. You've got the famous, like, he dunks his head in the cake bit.
Right, so that he can cover it, because, like, his mask fell out of a window. Yeah. Once again, because he was changing into a woman, and there's these little Asian kids across the alleyway were laughing at him.
I found that weird, too. I found that super weird. But, like, also, like, very 90s.
Yeah. Also, why are your blinds up?
Right. Yeah, just, like, close the window, dude. But, like, it's supposed to be, it's for a bit. Right? Yeah. Yep. And, like, the 90s were not live and let live, as they probably should have. Or as they like to pretend to be.
Yeah. They were still mad that gay people existed.
Yeah. Like, we had Will and Grace. We had Dharma and Greg. Everything was supposed to be copacetic. We're all supposed to be just chilling out.
Will and Grace is not great for the gay agenda.
Oh, man. So, as a not gay person, right, my opinion is different, probably.
I assume so.
But, like, the cultural context I have is coming from the main street with Will and Grace. And, like, yes, Will and Grace is problematic now. But I think at the time, it did a lot of good. It mainstreamed homosexuality in a way that made it acceptable to the, like, heteronormative 90s culture.
Right, but it did that the same way that media does for anything, where it assigns you a very specific role, very specific personality.
Oh, it's like problematic. It's definitely problematic.
Like, you can be a Muslim on TV, but you have to own a gas station.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, you can only do that, right?
And maybe that's another podcast or another episode we have where we talk about the role of that kind of like, well, you start out filling the role and you make people comfortable with it. And maybe there's like, is there a pathway to making people more empathetic? And
then you start subverting their expectations and making people into humans. Yeah. Like, you have to trick people into being good.
Right. Or is it always bad to be like that? Right. Like that might be historically, we may look at it like, oh, of course, Will and Grace was this way, and it helps people look at it this other way.
Yeah, let's do an
but
episode
maybe it
on
held
that.
us
That
back.
sounds awesome.
Maybe that was not helpful, right?
Yeah. Anyway.
Anyway.
Mrs. Doubtfire.
We go from Mrs. Sellner's visit to Daniel's first day on his day job.
Well, I actually want to say one thing.
Oh, go on.
About Mrs. Sellner. So
go off, girl. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
No, I'm doing it. I'm going.
Oh no.
So we see one of the bits or whatever is that he has to change back into his sister, quote unquote, Mrs. Doubtfire, to make tea for Mrs. Sellner. And then he does the cake face gag. So Miss Sellner's sitting very politely at a table. He serves her tea as Mrs. Doubtfire with all this icing on his face, and it starts dripping into her tea. And he explains that it's a face mask that he made, right? And then he leaves the room to go get himself. And Miss Sellner, for the first time, we actually see her be a person. And she takes a little bit of the stuff and she rubs a little bit onto her face. And that's the most characterizing thing we have. She is a woman who, I don't know, it's kind of an adventurous act. This just dripped off of someone's face.
Yeah.
So it's kind of gross.
It's definitely played as weird and as comedic. Yeah. It's
weird, but she's also you know what? I care about my looks. We're not made to think that she is a woman, right? She's firmly an old woman no one's supposed to look at, but she cares, right? She's oh, maybe I'll put a little on my face and see if it works. This would be cool. Yeah.
Well, I also wonder,
she doesn't actually
you look at that.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. And you look at that and you go oh, well, maybe this film is saying that even an older woman's place is to care about her appearance.
Yeah, and there's only... That's true.
A woman should always care about their appearance. And right? that's a little weird. That's a little icky.
It is a little weird. Yeah. This is true. I can't remember where I was going with that. But yeah,
I'm sorry.
I thought that was you're fine. I thought that was an interesting part of the scene. So
yeah.
So all right.
Yeah, so then we go on to Daniel's first day on his day job.
Mm-hmm. He gets a job moving film reels or shipping film reels or something.
Yeah,
right?
But we find out his job is it's a boring job at a studio, but at least it's related to his previous industry, which yeah, I don't expect everyone to know how kind of the entertainment industry works, but if he's an established voice actor, you've got that tight knit network.
Mm-hmm.
He probably I don't know. That's probably not important to the whole film.
I think it is, because the fact that he has alienated every single one of his contacts and cannot get any voice acting work says something about his character. He's difficult to work with and a narcissist, right?
Yeah. And he just he ends up having to work at a kind of an entry level warehousing type job at a television studio.
Yeah. He's doing manual labor. He's embarrassed about it, right? Mm-hmm. He's doing this because he has to.
Yeah, it's him brought low, right? Manual labor is beneath him.
It's not even that hard of manual labor. He's just moving film reels around.
Yeah, it's moving film reels. You're putting shit in, what is it? You pack the reels and then you ship them. You pack the boxes and ship them. That's the joke.
Yeah. But yeah, so because you're right, the people who, at least from my outside perspective, you learn about a voice actor and then you learn that they're in everything. Clearly they all go to the same Christmas party every year. Everyone knows each other. Yeah. So,
well, what's nuts is actually, where I live right now is actually a huge hub for voice acting work.
That's cool.
And it's crazy. I didn't work in animation or voice acting, but just working in the media industry, the amount of connections I have in that world is just kind of sometimes I have to think about it. I'm oh, wow, that's cool. I know the guy who voiced this big character in, such and such big anime, and that's cool.
That is cool.
But it's a small world working in entertainment. It doesn't take long for everyone to know everybody.
Yeah, and if you're a dickhead, everyone's going to know.
That gets out.
Yeah.
That absolutely gets out. Without getting too descriptive about it. Don't want to dox myself.
Who are you?
Yeah. So, his first day on the job, bog standard, kind of the job kind of sucks. It's menial. It's tedious. It's the stuff that his boss is a humorless man for once.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised to find out that this character was originally cast as a woman. That would not surprise me. He has his first day on the job. It sucks. And then he gets into his MrsDoubtfire thing and he starts his, picks up the children.
They come home, right? Because they get dropped off by the bus or something. Like, it looks like they're dropped off by a bus. There's a school bus in that scene. It's interesting because he doesn't have a car.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
He's always riding the bus.
Buses everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, it's not like they couldn't afford to get him a car.
Right.
Why didn't he have a car?
Because he had no job.
Right. But, why didn't he have a car from the marriage?
Oh, from the marriage?
Yeah, because she has a car. And he has to go to voice acting jobs, right? I just thought it was interesting. Probably just so that they could have the bus driver lech at him.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. And to, illustrate how low he's fallen, he has to take,
Maybe he sold his car to afford the apartment.
Maybe.
That'd be interesting.
Maybe. Also, we live in a place with bad public transit, so maybe it wasn't really a big deal for him living in San Francisco, where you've got streetcars and buses and all the nine.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so that could just be a cultural thing.
Yeah, so he is at the house now. He's fully as MrsDoubtfire, right? And the kids come home. At some point, he walks in, and they're watching Dick Van Dyke together.
Yes.
His children, right? And this is a thing that they clearly do every day. They're all settled in. They're decompressing after school, and they're watching Dick Van Dyke together. And he comes in, and he says, you need to go do your homework.
Yep. And discipline. Banhammer comes down.
Yeah, the Dick Van Dyke show is 30 minutes? It's not a long show. Watching one episode of the Dick Van Dyke show, it's not going to ruin their education, right? But it's important for him to establish that he has control over them at this point. Yes. And so even though, Lydia does have an attitude when she says, no, we'll watch it, right? She's clearly feeling weird and displaced. And also, she's fucking 14 at least? 16? I don't know. Right, she could have been left alone with the kids. I don't know why she even needs a nanny, except for to clean and maybe to cook, right?
Right, which is established.
Right.
And then Doubtfire has to establish the rules of
the house,
of this new house. Finally, Daniel has to act as a parent for once in his goddamn life.
And it's interesting, why did he feel like he had to do that now? Because he could just as easily have been a fun nanny.
Yeah,
right?
easily. But instead, finally, he decides to be a parent. He makes them clean the house when they disobey.
You know what I think is really interesting?
He brings down the punishment.
I think it's interesting because here's what I think that he was going for, and it backfired. I think he was trying to emulate his wife so that his kids would not like Mrs. Doubtfire.
Ooh, that's an interesting thought.
Yeah, so he was
the film definitely does not explore that, but that is interesting.
But doesn't that fit, right?
Yes.
He's immediately no, go do your homework. And he treats it like it's not the right thing to do. It's just the thing he has to do to get away with this ruse.
Yeah.
But it's 100% the right thing to do, right? And it backfires on him because he starts to insist that the kids do their homework. Well, the first scene is horrible because he forces them all to do manual labor, after they rebel against him or whatever. He throws the TV remote control into the fish tank. And for listeners who do not know me, I am obsessed with fancy goldfish. That is one of my things, one of my many things. One of the few things I don't share with Matt that we are mutually obsessed with. And that fish tank is way too small for all those goldfish. And I will point that out in every media that we watch because it's almost always true. And B, do not throw fucking electronics in a goldfish tank. What? Okay. So he does this.
Yep. This is to establish dominance.
In an aggressive way. He's supposed to be aggressive. A little old British nanny, and he jerks the remote out of her hand and throws it in a fish tank, which is not really what a woman would do generally, right? In terms of, it just feels like a much more assertive and aggressive, almost violent action than you would expect.
So finally the kids have to be punished and they have to put up with a parental figure actually there.
Mm-hmm.
And,
but he doesn't punish them in a nice way. He's sitting on the couch and drinking iced tea.
Yeah, he's chilling and not cleaning and not being... Not learning the lessons that Daniel needs to learn.
Right. They're like scrubbing the walls and vacuuming, and even the little sweet Natty, who's 5 years old, is like sweeping or something. Like
she's like polishing a candelabra.
Oh yeah, she's polishing the silver.
Yeah. So finally, finally, like, okay, go study, right? So that we can go to the next bit, which is the fucking. I mean, it's a funny bit. It's a funny bit. It's Daniel learning that he needs to figure out how to cook.
Because he's really bad at it.
He's terrible at it. And it's like this, it's this whole bit, stuff catches on fire. It's a funny bit.
What's interesting is he didn't consider the fact that cooking might be a skill.
Yes.
Like he just assumed, oh, I can do this. This is just a thing women do, maybe? Mm-hmm. Like, how hard could it be? Like, he has this big cookbook out. Clearly, this man has never cooked in his life. There's, sauces simmering and exploding.
Everywhere,
and
things are overboiling. Very, very, cliche, stereotypical, oh, no, the kitchen's falling apart.
What used to be salmon is, crusted to the bottom of a pan, and he, dumps a whole bunch of basil on it.
What's crazy is, the amount of work that Daniel is putting into this. Mm-hmm. He's pouring so much energy into he's got the cookbook open, he's watching a video, whatever. He's putting so much energy into the cooking and into disciplining the kids and all this stuff. It's this was energy he was not putting into his marriage.
Right?
This is all energy he's just pouring into this ruse, this scheme.
And he's not even doing it now, right?
Yeah.
He's become the partner she needed.
Right.
In the worst possible way.
Yeah. He's putting all his energy into a scam or into a con instead of getting his act together like the court requires. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, we do the whole steamed hams Simpsons bit where he orders takeout instead because he ruins the dinner. Mm-hmm. Which is just
yeah. It's sort of like you think you're cheating on a test by studying for it. That's what he's doing. Right?
Yes, absolutely.
I will not actually study for a test.
Yeah.
But I will think that I've stolen the actual test, but it's a study guide, and then I do all this work to memorize it, and then, oh my God, I accidentally was a human parent, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so, dinner's finally on the table. Miranda comes home.
I have a weird, hold on, I have a weird thing. So I watched this movie a ton as a kid, and there's this one scene where he's spooning sauce out of a little,
oh yeah, that was
bowl.
A little weird. Yeah.
Well, no, so for whatever reason, when I was a kid, I was obsessed with the noise that one little part made. I used to watch that one little part over and over again because it was just really satisfying to listen to because he's making weird little spoony noises.
Absolutely, yeah.
I still remember it. I'm yes, that's saucy. I was actually looking forward to getting to watch it again when you picked this movie. It's I mean,
that goes into another thing that I wanted to talk about later. Is just the sound design and music of this film is perfect.
Oh yeah.
Just really well done. Congratulations, sound designers on this film. You guys nailed it.
Strong work. The heroes of this film, in fact.
Yeah. So dinner served, and for the first time, Daniel is finally judged on his value as a parent. Mm. Right? Dinner's delicious. The house is clean. Mm-hmm. Daniel's finally done a good job as Mrs. Doubtfire, but, for the first time in his life, he is, even his kids are judging him on his value as a parent and not on his, funny, goofy, comedic personality.
Not his value as a clown.
Yeah. I think that was important. I was hey, I really wish that was emphasized a little bit more, that he learned some lesson. But again, that's not the character, the journey this character's on, even though it should have been.
I will also say that may not be fair yet because all of that was faked. The kids did the cleaning and he ordered takeout.
Oh, yeah. He wouldn't have learned from that, but he got a taste of what it would have been like.
Right. And then Miranda walks in and the kids are upstairs doing their homework and everything is clean and quiet. And you can tell that this is not normal for her, right? Yes, she's been working all day. She doesn't really know what she's going to come home to because this is the first night that she hasn't, I guess, had Daniel there fucking stuff up. And the table is set like a gourmet dinner. Like there's candlelight and like food that doesn't look like kids would eat it, you know?
Right. I mean, it cost him like $130 or whatever.
Yeah.
But, which in 1993 dollars was like,
Yeah, like he gets paid $300 a week and he spent almost half of it on the first dinner.
Yeah. So that scene happens. You know, we're supposed to go like, oh, if only he had put this much effort into his marriage when he was, you know, not pretending to be a British nanny.
I think what we're supposed to take away from this is she's wrong.
Right.
I think that's what we're supposed to take away. Look at him. He could have done stuff. You should have waited. You should have given him more chances or helped him. You should be responsible for the fact that he didn't grow in this direction is kind of like an undertone I get. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
It's gross. It's real gross.
So then he heads home. And we have another bus driver scene where it turns out women aren't allowed to have hairy legs.
Nope.
But, and I say that is like, actually, the bus driver thinks it's fine. We're supposed to think that's really understanding and empathetic of him. But also, like, underlying is this implication that women aren't supposed to have hairy legs. And
no, it's supposed to be a freaky thing, right?
Yeah, you're not supposed to be, an older woman especially, is not supposed to be human.
Yeah. So, like, his fake stockings or whatever come down. I like that he does all of this work to pretend to be a woman, but he won't shave his legs, A. B.
Right.
His stocking comes down and he has like a very clearly, I'm Robin Williams and I am part bear sort of hairy knee exposed. And the bus driver sees it and he immediately covers it up with his skirt. And the bus driver says, oh, I kind of like a little hair on my women, like Mediterranean style. So like there's some racism going on here.
Just a little.
And also.
Just a little.
Yeah. And some overt sexual objectification, right? Like obviously the only reason that hair would be okay is because a man liked it. You know, like God forbid you just have hair because you're a mammal.
Right.
And
another missed opportunity for Daniel to empathize with women.
Right?
Completely
like this creep is just always bothering me.
Yeah. Can't even go home at the end of a long day of work, working 2 jobs.
Yep. Living 2 lives.
Yep.
Yeah. It was a gross scene. It was really gross.
Yeah. But it's played as like charming and cute. And then actually after this, I don't think we see the bus driver again. I think that's the last time we see him. And I just like, I still think about that bus driver.
Yeah.
Like,
it's real creepy.
In the universe of this film, where he's supposed to be the sweet guy.
Yeah, like he even says something about,
and then all of a sudden he starts seeing this woman that he used to hit on the bus, and she's on TV. Like,
I didn't even think about that.
And then he finds out that it's played by a man.
That's amazing. I had not even considered that. Wow.
I still think about that bus driver. But
I bet the bus driver had more character growth than Robin Williams did in this movie.
Oh, absolutely. He discovered something about himself throughout the course of this film.
Yeah.
Oh,
he needs love, first off, because he's hitting on women on the bus. You'd like join a book club or start online dating, whatever. Anyway.
Yeah. So after the bus driver and the hairy legs, we get to the montage to Dude Looks Like a Lady.
Oh my God. I did not realize that those were the words to that song. I thought it was You Look Like a Lady for my whole life. You look like a lady, which is not that bad, right? Like being a lady at this point in time was a good thing, right? Like a lady specifically, not a girl or a slut or whatever, a lady.
Right.
But no.
Dude Looks Like a Lady. Which, you know, it's a fun song. You know.
Is it? I'm going to look up the lyrics.
I don't care about the lyrics. I'm just talking about purely on the auditory level.
Yeah, like it's an upbeat song.
Yep.
Oh, it's by
And we
Aerosmith?
have the quick montage where
I'm learning so many things.
we have a quick montage where Daniel's connecting with his kids for probably the first time ever. You know, he's cleaning the house and doing household chores again, probably for the first time ever. He's watching Julia Child cooking videos, which I think is a fun callback. I think there's a reference to Julia Child early in the film. When he's doing a bunch of voices.
He's just like dancing with a broom. He's
the broom guitar, famous shot from this movie. And it's like all of the stuff that he should have been doing as a husband and as a father he can only do as a con.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the only way he could see himself doing this work, is this woman's work, is he has to put on the persona of a woman.
Also consider the fact that he's in and out of work constantly and his career is shit. She can afford on her own salary both this house and to pay someone $300 a week to be her spouse.
Yeah.
He could have just taken care of his kids and the house, but no, his ego was too important. He had to be an actor. I know you said you don't care about the lyrics, but I have to share this, and I'm so sorry.
No.
So.
Oh no.
Yeah. It starts off, dude looks like a lady, cruised into a bar on the shore. And this part's actually in the movie. Her picture graced the grime on the door. She's a long lost love at first bite. Baby, maybe you're wrong, but you know it's all right. That's right. And then later he's like, backstage, we're having the time of our lives until someone says, forgive me if I seem out of line. Then she whipped out a gun and tried to blow me away. Because she's a trans woman.
Oh.
Right? Like, that's why dude looks like a lady. This entire song is about a trans woman.
Oh.
And like, oh, I know it's so wrong, but oh, you seem so right. And then later it's like, never judge a book by its cover or who you're going to love by your lover. Love put me wise to her love in disguise. She had the body of a Venus. Is that like a Venus de Milo sort of thing? Or like,
yeah.
And then later it's like, let me take a peek, dear. Turn the other cheek. At some point he says he was a lady. Yeah, it's all about a trans woman.
Right. That the singer insists on calling a dude.
Dude looks like a lady. And it's like, no, if you're a trans woman, you are a lady. Like, you do not look like a lady. You are a fucking lady.
Real quick for anybody listening, trans women are women.
Yeah, trans rights matter. Intersectional feminism is the only kind, and you cannot gatekeep gender. Yep. So,
women rights are human rights.
Yep. Are we missing anything?
Montage,
I'm sure we're missing a lot.
House, Julia Child, boom guitar.
All to dude looks like a lady.
Yeah.
Which
there's a throwaway joke with a purse snatching.
Oh that
goes
that
wrong
was weird
because like. I don't know. I felt really victim blaming. Like, oh, your purse only gets snatched because you're not man enough to stop a purse.
Yeah, that's exactly what I took away too. Right? Like, oh, if you had actually been an old lady, your purse would be gone. But instead, you're a guy, and he just didn't know. And I'm like, this is weird.
Women are weak, men are superior.
Yes, obviously.
Yeah, and then finally, Daniel meets Stuart for the first time. Because Miranda comes home early with Stuart to meet the kids. And they're like immediately pissing match.
Oh, yes.
And it's so quickly Daniel tries to control Miranda's sex.
And relationship with this man.
Yes. Miranda has no agency over her own sexual needs. Daniel must control it.
Yeah. Oh my God. So this starts one of the most toxic, horrible parts of the movie, right? So like when he walks in, Stuart is actively engaging with the children. It's not like he is there, just meeting the kids so he can bang their mom, right?
Right.
He's like he's like talking to little Natty and everyone's like smiling and like it looks like a nice scene. And then Mrs. Doubtfire comes in. One of the reasons that I wanted to point out how isolated Miranda is because she immediately starts turning to this complete stranger for advice, right?
Yeah.
She starts seeking out Mrs. Doubtfire and asking her questions and she asks, is this the point? Yeah, I think this is the point where she asks something about when was the last time you started having feelings for someone after your husband died, right? Because our fake Mrs. Doubtfire.
And then Mrs. Doubtfire is like, oh, never.
And she even says something about like, if you decide to try to have sex with anyone else, good luck with your conscience or something. I can't even remember the exact words, but it was very
according
damning.
to Mrs. Doubtfire, Mr. Doubtfire was not all that much in the bedroom either.
Yeah.
So like, a woman's responsibility is to her man, regardless of anything else.
Grin and bear it. Yeah. Yeah.
So
What
weird.
did she, oh my God, this part was horrible too. It was like,
Winston's idea of foreplay was brace yourself.
Was brace yourself, Ellie. And I'm like, oh my God. Is he trying to make himself look better in real life by comparison? Right? Because he's basically saying like, look, this is the perfect marriage, because that's kind of what he's trying to portray when he's Mrs. Doubtfire, right? Mm-hmm. He's an expert on marriage and relationships. He's had this very long marriage with this fake dude. And even though this fake dude was horrible in bed, still stay with him. But yeah, that ex-husband of yours, I bet he wasn't that bad.
Right.
Like he specifically says that he's probably a Casanova compared to my Winston. Right.
And again, this would all work just fine if this was the journey that Daniel's character was on, where they had an arc and they learned. But this is just Daniel being selfish, and they never learn from it. There's no lesson to be learned here. Yeah, this is also the first. I mean, one of the things that we haven't really dived into a lot yet is how fucking creepy and illegal this is. Oh, yeah, no, this is way crazy. We're not supposed to think that, but like he is invading her space and pretending to be someone else, and now against her will. Yeah, and now she's sharing she's sharing. Yeah, she's sharing these personal things. She's asking him for advice about her relationship with him. Yes, and none of this is okay. He's lying to his children. He's lying to his wife. He's invading their space. And all he's doing is trying to control all of the relationships. Yeah, he's trying to exert control over his entire family now that he's lost it because of his own behavior. Like, this sort of behavior would be unacceptable from someone you did love. Like, if I came to your house and pretended to be someone else for weeks, somehow very convincingly. Yeah, we would not be having this podcast. It was me. Yeah, it would be horrible, and it would be a betrayal of trust and integrity, and we're just supposed to take it because it's funny. So yeah. But this is like the first time that they have some inappropriate conversation about sex, and he starts to exert this control that he's gotten from his relationship that he's established with her. Yeah. Because the most important thing about Miranda is her sex. And then it's after the scene, we kind of go back to the... Oh, I had a flashback. Sorry, to an earlier part. Do you remember in the scene where she comes in and she gets the kids an hour early and he forces her to show him the ad? And she says something like, do you want to see anything else? And he said, if you're offering. And she said, not anymore. Yeah. That whole thing was just really fucked up. I forgot about that until this point. That was pretty icky. Yeah. Yeah, that was gross. Like, I made note of it. The kids could hear him, right? Yeah. And then he even said something like, well, it's just the same as always, right? So he's already like, you never gave me sex. Shrew of a woman who... Yeah, can't. But she's gorgeous and smart and funny. Like, she's... And accomplished and professional and competent and... a good mom. Like, she loves her kids and she cares about them, right? She's keeping up with their grades and she's doing her best. Yes. So anyway, now he's trying to manipulate her into not being with Stuart. Right. And then we kind of move on from that to back to regular day to day. Oh no. Yeah. I know what's coming. Mrs. Doubtfire is just doing the thing. Like, everyone's getting along. Yep. Things are going great. This is the midpoint of the movie. So here's where we have our, I think, false defeat is what it would be considered. He's having a great time with Liddy, practicing for a spelling bee, which apparently is something 14-year-old girls do. Yeah. And he goes to the bathroom. It's funny because they spell out the word discriminate right before the scene. Right. Which I find hilarious. Yeah. Because it goes to pee, and of course he pees standing up because he is able to. Because if anybody, I feel like anybody who can will, because it's convenient and nice. I don't know. I know trans women who have not had bottom surgery who prefer to pee sitting down. Because it feels more, it feels less dysphoric from a gender perspective. I could see that. I could absolutely see that. Yeah. Anyway, just a fun commentary. Yeah. So he's standing up, and then of course that's when Chris, because apparently he didn't lock the door.
Yeah.
To go.
He walks into a shut bathroom. So there's a lot of different problems with this scene.
Yeah.
But
Chris walks in and sees Mrs. Doubtfire peeing standing up.
Mm-hmm.
And this causes fucking capital P problems.
Yeah.
For Chris, who is having an aneurysm, who cannot handle it. Runs to Lydia. He's a she. She's a he. He's a she. He's got both. She's got both parts.
He's half woman, half man.
Yeah, which of course is like horrible.
Which half, right? Like,
right.
Yeah, the way that they treat this,
Mm-hmm.
I cannot fucking even. Oh my god! So I'll try to.
Chris wants to call the cops.
Yes, and
because
they grab
because
weapons.
Someone's gender is different than they thought.
Yeah. They grab
That's a
weapons.
Weird.
Also, all it takes to get Lydia to like grab a tennis racket is for what he said, right?
Mm-hmm.
He just says, "Oh, she's not all a woman," and they're ready to like beat the shit out of her. And I'm like, what? This woman who you have clearly already bonded with and feel comfortable with, your first instinct is, oh God, you find this horrible thing out about her.
Yeah. Let's beat her with a tennis racket.
Right. And then call the cops because she's peeing. What the fucking fuck? Like,
yeah.
No.
Did not, that joke did not age.
No.
Does not play well.
It's a perfect example of straight panic. It's even like the straight panic defense, right? Like let's get weapons.
Think of the children.
She tricked me into having sex with her, so I beat her to death with a tire iron. Yeah.
Right.
Because the idea of having sex with a woman who has a penis is the worst possible thing. I've actually done this, and it's actually the best possible thing. I just want you to know. But for anyone who's listening, this movie is horrible. Like at this, this is terrible.
Well, I mean, at least I was just waiting for Chris to vomit.
Yeah, well, then it gets worse. Like, so even after he finds out it's his dad in makeup, he won't touch him.
Yes, he's still so uncomfortable with it. Because that's why I was like, like even there's a line where it's like, you don't like that, do you? Because that would be the worst.
Right.
As if that was an enjoyable state for Daniel to be in.
Also, like, let's consider the fact that their biggest problem with this is that he's decided to dress up as a woman and not that he's decided to trick his entire family for weeks by pretending to be someone else. Like, we'll just glance right over that. It's fine. Betrayal of trust? Nah. But no, I won't.
And this is where we, I'm sorry.
Oh, I won't even touch your hand. Like, at the end, he's like, no, don't worry. It'll be okay. And then he's like, don't worry. I understand. It's just guy stuff. No, it's not. It's fucking transphobic as hell, and it's horrible.
That's some toxic masculinity right there.
Yeah.
And then, like, it's in this interaction where the line is, "Who did this to you?" is Uncle Frank and Aunt Jack. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think like it was like it's played as a joke. Mm-hmm. It's not, given the context of the scene, it was not empathetic. It's not an empathetic way to view Jack and
the actual healthy
Frank's
couple
relationship.
in this movie.
Yeah, the only healthy couple in this entire movie. And then like a true sociopath, the first thing that Daniel does is make his kids keep the secret from their mother.
Mm-hmm. And their sister.
Like, don't tell mom or I'll go to jail and you'll never see me again. Yeah. Like, that's manipulative. That's awful. Mm-hmm. And it's supposed to be played as like this sweet moment. It's like, oh, now they've got something all together.
Yeah, I'm glad that I've got this time with you and now you know, so we can actually be a family kind of. But no, he's just making them complicit in his fraud.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's such a messed up.
It's terrible.
And it's played as like sweet. Mm-hmm.
Yep. They just love him so much that, it's interesting because even though they know, he still acts like Mrs. Doubtfire in the remaining scenes, right? Like he still cleans and cooks and is basically a better dad than he has been ever. So,
so we finish this scene with where he's making his children form a pact against their mother, which should absolutely disqualify him from any sort of parental rights whatsoever. Like this moment alone, let alone all the crazy shit that's been going on the whole goddamn movie.
Yeah,
like,
it's also the extreme version of don't tell your mom, because he's already done that about like the party, right?
Yeah.
But this idea that marriage and parenting is a contentious relationship, right? Like it's always the mom versus the dad.
Yes.
Right? It's always don't tell your mother, because she's the prison warden and I'm your fellow prisoner.
Right. I'm fun. And she's not. So we go from here to like a really quick scene where Daniel's at his day job shipping things. We kind of foreshadow the ending a little bit. Where
is this where he does
the boring kids show? Oh
yeah, he talks to the boss about the boring kids show. Someone he doesn't know is the boss, who ends up being like the owner of the company, and he's like, "Oh, this is the most boring dinosaur show ever."
Yeah, and then we go from there to another scene where Daniel or Mrs. Doubtfire is doing all the things that Daniel should have done if he was putting his energy into his own relationships. Mrs. Doubtfire brings Miranda flowers, and there's even a line where Miranda says, "Who needs a husband when I've got you?"
I've got you, yeah.
Which I felt like was very telling. Again, this is one of those things where this movie is so close. If it would just like, and I think one of the screenwriters was a woman, so maybe that's where all the good stuff is coming from. The
almost stuff came from.
Right, like if Daniel would just go on this journey and learn these lessons. And this is where Daniel has his first honest conversation with Miranda about the nature of their relationship. I mean, Daniel as Mrs. Doubtfire, but he has to confront his failings as Daniel.
And it's so weird because all of these conversations should have been had between them, right? There's so many, even the very, very, very last scene was a conversation that should have happened between him and his kids or him and his wife.
Yes.
When we'll get there, but like when he is actually having the TV show, right? I don't know if you remember that part, but.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's sitting down and he's talking to Miranda about their marriage.
His failings as a husband.
She used to come home and cry herself to sleep without him knowing. And like, who doesn't notice their spouse crying themselves to sleep? Like,
yeah, it's a little weird. That's a little weird.
Yeah, especially because it sounds like it happened pretty often. But she talks about the fact that, you know, this whole movie up to this point has been, he can't live without his kids. But that's exactly what she's been doing for 15 years. Yeah. Right? She has to take care of everything. So they don't have a relationship with her. She never gets to see them, you know? And even when she does, she's the bad guy. And so he's done to her what he refuses to let happen to him.
So after the conversation with Miranda, where he has to confront some hard truths about the nature of his relationship with her, I keep calling him James Bond. Stuart invites the whole family, including Mrs. Doubtfire, to the country club for like visit the pool. And the pool's like this cool posh thing.
Yeah.
And the whole time, even Daniel's going like, "Oh, I shouldn't be here. This is quote beyond obsession." And it's like the first moment of like, yeah, you done fucked up, kid.
Yeah, what's weird is even after the conversation with Miranda, he doesn't change his behavior at all. He doesn't think, my God.
He's still going.
Yeah, he's still, like, what is his end game, right? Is he trying to get her back? No. Like, what is he going to do? Is he trying to convince her that she's... Sorry, my cat is scratching her ears. Tarragon, can you go away, please?
No. He's trying to control Miranda's home.
And life.
Yeah, it's messed up.
Yeah.
You know, and so Daniel avoids like getting into a bathing suit because obviously the prosthetics don't go that far. And Daniel sits at the bar drinking, just drinking and just dealing with like, it's like, oh, this man is moving in on my woman.
Yeah, moving in on my family.
Very possessive. moving in on the whole family. And then Stuart comes to the bar to get some drinks for... Oh.
Yeah. Oh, and like his family looks really happy.
Oh, they're
his
super
wife
happy.
Is like Miranda is
fun.
laughing. They're playing in the pool. The kids are happy and bonding together. They're spending time with their mom, you know? And Stuart's
having
really
fun with
sweet.
their mom. Yeah.
Yeah. He invited the whole, like, he is a man trying to court a woman, and he is bringing in her whole family and accepting
whole family, including the housekeeper.
All of it. Yeah, like including the weird housekeeper who has said very strange things to him by now. I can't remember what she said to him.
Clearly been mean to him the whole time, like antagonistic and like...
Super. Oh, the first time, one of the times he comes, he steals a piece off the car, and then he says something about compensating for a... He literally says small genitals, like in the movie. And I'm like, oh my God, this is on Disney+.
Yeah. And so Stuart comes up to get a drink or get a bunch of drinks for the whole family, like not just alcoholic, like just drinks. And like one of the other guys there who I guess is regular at the club, they have a conversation like, oh, I'm not, Stuart's never really been one for kids. It's like, oh, he used to be a bit of a playboy. Not really, but this family is so special to him.
Right.
And he cares so much. And this is where Pierce Brosnan just comes off as like super charming, super nice guy.
He
like,
does.
You know what? This, Natty is a sweetheart. The whole family is just so wonderful.
Look at these great kids.
Yeah, I love Miranda Hillard, and I love her family. And I don't care who knows it.
That's so sweet. And he even says, like, I'm pushing 40, and I'm realizing I'm doing this growth. I'm realizing that the lifestyle that I have been leading is unsustainable, which is why he reached out to a person who probably left him for something more committed, right? Like probably wanted a family and he didn't, or something like that. We're speculating, right? But something broke them up, and he had some philandering years, and now he's like, you know what? She was the one. Yeah.
Yeah. And Brosnan just comes off just really charming here.
Yeah,
really
there's
nice.
No artifice in him. He's being honest. He doesn't have to say any of these things, right? Like he could have been, this very easily could have been like I'm just trying to get in her pants, or some sort of creepy thing.
Yeah. But and of course, Daniel takes this the wrong way.
Oh, he asks about like, he even, this is a weird thing that they should not have written. But the other guy was like, well, what about their real dad? And like, that's a weird phrasing. But anyway, and he says, the guy's a loser. Which is correct.
Yeah. Which is like, that feels like an artifact from an earlier draft of the script where like Brosnan's character was more villainous. For sure. Because like that just doesn't play well with the character we're seeing on screen.
It doesn't, unless you consider the fact that he's probably had to listen to Miranda talk about her divorce and how horrible her marriage was, right? Like he's on her team now. So like if you're on her team, this horrible man who made her life miserable for 15 years is a loser. Like he's bad. Because it's like when when you have a friend who's going through a breakup, it doesn't matter how much you like their partner. You're like, that dude's the worst.
Yeah, screw that guy.
Screw that guy until you get back together and then, I liked him all along. But anyway.
So like, then there's like a really quick throwaway joke where Daniel is like, as Mrs. Doubtfire is looking up and down this woman, tries to buy her a drink on Brosnan's tab. And she's just like, ew, no, because homosexuality is icky.
Well,
I'm like, that's kind of like a weird message to send after we already established that like Gay Bro and Aunt Jack are awesome.
That's interesting. I did not take that away from this at all.
But also is like weird because like it was also a little bit of Daniel in a woman's space. Yeah. Bringing a creeper. So like, I don't know how I feel. It's just that the whole section is just weird.
What the hell was he thinking? Because he looks at her like he is a man. He is staring at her. And he winks at her, which I maintain to this day that no one can wink in an uncreepy way. I will die on this hill, right? No, take that back. For people who cannot see, Matt just winked at me and he's dead to me now. But yeah, you cannot wink in a non-creepy manner. There is nothing that a wink will convey that is not creepy. But yeah, so he's ogling this woman. And so, like, to put it all into context, right? He's here because he wants his family back so bad and allegedly misses his wife or is jealous that someone else is taking her or whatever. And then he is, like, eye fucking this poor lady in a bikini who's just coming up to get a drink because it's hot outside. And like, what was his end goal, right? Like, he tries to buy her a drink and she's like, no, thank you. You're a weird, creepy old woman who just eye fucked me and winked at me, which can be nothing but creepy. So I wasn't actually getting the anti-gay thing, but that's interesting.
Yeah. I just like felt like that was like the weirdness about that. Cause like, I just don't know that joke works in any other context. Right. No,
but like, I don't think it works at all, but
yeah. Oh yeah. It doesn't, certainly not on today's lens. Again, comedy ages poorly. But apparently everything from the 90s aged poorly. So we go from the country club scene where we establish that Brosnan's awesome. Stewart's a good guy. We go to a quick studio scene where we establish a dinner meeting that Daniel will have with the bigwig at the studio after impressing him with being a dick about the current programming.
Right, like he takes over the dinosaurs and makes them sing or do weird things in a Robin Williams way.
So like the guy's like, you know what? I want to have a meeting with you. How's, Friday, Saturday or whatever at this restaurant. Yeah.
This part of the movie, I realized he has not actually scheduled anything for himself. Everyone just tells him what time to be at a place. Yeah. Right? Like the social worker does the same thing. Like, I've made you an appointment with a job place. I've made you an appointment for Friday. Like, no one asks, hey, what's your schedule like? He's like a child. All of his scheduling is done for him.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then we have another scene with the kids this is the second and only other scene where the kids are over for visitation. And the house is clean and there's like a home cooked meal on the table. And it's like a direct contrast to the first visitation. And I guess this is the scene where we're supposed to see that Daniel has grown, but it falls completely flat.
It does.
It doesn't work for me at all.
It's not enough.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Miranda, when she comes to pick up the kids, says as much. Yeah. Like, oh, this is really nice, but what could I do without Mrs. Doubtfire? And this is where Daniel finds out that the Mrs. Doubtfire scheme worked too well. Oh, no!
Yeah. Because he's like, well, just get rid of her and I'll take care of the kids. And she's like, no, they're doing better than they ever have.
Right. Because everyone they have an parental figure in their life.
They have some stability.
Yep.
And also, like, Mrs. Doubtfire is Miranda's only friend right now.
Yeah. That we see on the screen, for sure.
Yeah, like, we don't, like, no other girlfriends come and comfort her after her divorce. In the next scene, when she invites Mrs. Doubtfire to her birthday, she doesn't invite anyone else, right? Like, no one else exists in her world. No coworkers, no whatever. It's just this island of loneliness and manipulation.
After this, we go to a scene where we slut shame Miranda.
Oh, my God, yes! Oh, God.
There's a scene where Miranda is trying to pick a dress for a birthday dinner with Stuart and her family. And
so bad.
And the only thing that Daniel can think to do is call his ex-wife and mother of his children a giant old slutbag.
Yeah, he calls her a harlot.
Both of those dresses are for street workers, which is like a whole other like sex shamey, sex worker shamey thing. Like,
yeah, and like his daughters are in the room because she's trying to she's excited about her birthday. She wants to like get advice from her teenage daughter, and it's really sweet. Like, it should have been a sweet moment, right? Like, they're doing a mother-daughter thing, and she's really excited to actually, like, she probably hasn't had her birthday celebrated in 15 years, right? And now there's a man who's taking her to her favorite restaurant. And
if this was a movie about Daniel's journey to be a more empathetic human being, this would have been a really good opportunity for Daniel to put aside his ego and say, you know what? This dress makes you look amazing. And this will make, like, you will have a great night. But instead he picks out some like frilly thing that like nobody wants.
Yeah, like it's basically a potato sack in a dress, right? Like it's got long sleeves and it's very long.
Even Lydia, who knows the secret of Mrs. Doubtfire, is going like, no, you're going too far, Dad. Like,
yeah. Well, like, the kids like Stuart. That's the thing, right? Like, they never say anything bad about Stuart. And the things he says about the dresses are horrible. Like you said, he says red is the traditional color of streetwalkers, and that black one is so short, I hope you waxed. Which, like, He's not talking about her legs, right?
Mm-mm.
And it's like, are you serious? Also, you're allowed to have hair, right? Like,
Yeah,
come
you're allowed to
on.
be a human being.
Yeah, turns out mammals, they have hair. If you want to, sport a proud bush, do it because it's great. So,
So, and this is when we find out that, Lydia's birthday dinner, or not Lydia, I'm sorry, Miranda's birthday dinner is the same time as this, as the boss meeting at the same restaurant. Now,
will wonders never cease. San Francisco, such a small place.
Beautiful. And really, for whatever reason, Daniel's character cannot, because the movie has to happen. Mm-hmm. Basically, Mrs. Doubtfire can't say no to the birthday dinner.
This feels so forced.
It's impossible. It's impossible for this to happen because the movie has to happen.
Well, I'm going to take this as Miranda has been so desperately lonely that she has made this really weird connection with a person who's not from her culture or her generation, and now is a little bit codependent on her, right? So in the same way that Stuart has filled in this sort of romantic gaping hole that's been around for a decade, Mrs. Doubtfire is filling in the rest, right? She's using her as mother, friend, sister, husband, right? She's just plugging her into wherever she'll fit. And so she needs her there. She wants her there very badly. She does not take no for an answer.
Mm-hmm. I think this film would have been more interesting if she was just listen, I'm trying to get lucky with Stuart that night, so I need you to take the kids after.
That would be amazing.
That would just be so much more honest and wonderful.
Yeah. Women aren't allowed to like sex, though.
No, they're not.
They have to be pursued aggressively. They have to be captured like unicorns in ancient forests.
Yep. So we established that the dinner has to happen. Daniel can't reschedule with the bigwig because he's a bigwig. He's busy.
Yep.
And we go from there basically into the dinner.
Yeah, and it's interesting.
And then we're finally in Act 3.
He makes this choice, right? He could have rescheduled for 4 months later, because he could reschedule, just not very soon.
Yeah. It's important. It's a big career opportunity for him.
Yeah.
Which is important.
As we've established, he's a narcissist, right? He's going to threaten his entire ruse and come, because this is not going to go well. No one would think this is a great idea.
Oh, God, no. No, and even his narcissism is tested when they go to get a table. Mm-hmm. And Daniel, as Mrs. Doubtfire, forces the kids to sit in the smoking section.
Yeah, oh.
At the beginning of the movie, he's extremely anti-smoking. Mm-hmm. So he's forced to confront the one good thing that we know about this guy. Turns out he doesn't give that much of a shit about it.
Nope.
Because he makes his kids and the rest of the family and Stuart sit in the smoking section for secondhand smoke and all that fun stuff. Mm-hmm. Because he doesn't want to sit in the same section as
the boss guy.
Yeah.
Who got seated right before him.
Yes. And then we do fun and games where he's trying to go from one, he's going to both tables. Mm-hmm. Oh, hold on, I go to the bathroom, change it, and then go to the other. Yeah. The other bathroom.
Oh, don't. He's super creepy to Stuart at this point, too.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember exactly what he says, but he's getting aggressive. Worse.
Yeah. Talks about Miranda having sex toys.
Oh, yeah.
Which apparently is the worst thing in the world
also
for a woman to have sex toys.
He says something like, be careful, you might chip your teeth. I don't get that.
Yeah.
I am clearly missing something. But basically, he says that she's got a jackhammer in her bedroom.
Yeah, jackhammer is it brings up that tired trope and that horribly sexist trope of a man has to compete with the sex toy.
No,
right?
It's not.
That threatens their masculinity, and it's
first off, there's no competition. Second off,
sex toys are way better.
Yeah, just join the party, right? Do not try to compete with the robots of the future. Just accept that you are now a participant in the robot dance. Yep. So, yeah. But yeah, also, she wouldn't need, let's say that this is even remotely true, which I hope it is, because God forbid, she hasn't had sex in forever. But let's hope that, she actually does have some sort of release at some point from this very difficult life that she has. Yeah. It's his fucking fault because he's he's the person that's supposed to be filling these needs for the last 15 years.
Yeah. And the whole time, Daniel is using his children to confront Stuart, which is just weird. He manipulates, like, oh, hey, don't you want to go get a dessert or something so that I have this second to, like, be a dick? Like,
oh my God. He tells her he tells him that she has crabs. Yes. Do you remember that?
Yes.
In a gross way,
and Stuart, to his credit, fucking takes it like a goddamn champion.
Yeah.
He's just like, oh, that's nice.
Please stop talking to me, you super creepy old lady. It's a huge credit to Stuart that he does not immediately, like, try to get Miranda to fire this woman that she clearly cares about. No,
he takes it because he's like, he understands that it's not his place.
Yeah, he's a gentleman. But in a nice way, not in a, like, whatever. Like, he doesn't defend her virtue or anything. He's not a savior figure. He's just like, this is weird and I want this to stop.
Yeah. Like, I'm just here to have a good time with this lady that I like and her wonderful family.
Who I bought a beautiful bracelet.
Right. Because
for her birthday.
Yeah.
Because I'm rich.
And at the same time that he's doing this, he's like, you know, Daniel is running off to go have dinner with the bigwig. Yeah. And we have, like, very traditional masculinity.
Oh,
direct, like, as a direct comparison to Stuart.
Yeah, like,
they're just getting drunk off of scotch.
They're not even eating food.
Right, they're just drinking, like, fucking fish.
Yeah, and the boss, like, keeps ordering drinks and, like, they do not really talk business at all.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, he gets mixed up and he comes back to the table and he has lipstick on and he smells like perfume.
Yes.
And the guy,
he's not, foreshadowing what's going to happen later. He just comes back with lipstick and perfume. And Daniel just comes up with a quick story that, like, he, like, ran into somebody from high school who never got over him.
A waitress he used to date.
Yeah. And
he seemed to imply that they did more than make out. To me, anyway.
Right. And then boss is like, does your girlfriend have a girlfriend?
Yeah.
And Daniel's just like, hey, it's the 90s.
He also says, yeah, I've got the stretch outside. So this man came to this business meeting with a manual laborer from his factory to drink a bunch of expensive scotch, and he took a limo. So this guy's a fucking character. I have no idea what's going on with him.
Oh, but gosh.
He wants a friend of this man, and he's easily 20 years older than Daniel.
Yes.
So he wants a much younger woman that he's never met before to join him for sex in a limo. So he's a creep.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Super creepy. What's nuts is, like, the character, like, definitely has these, like, weird, like, Feinstien vibes.
Oh, yeah. Like,
I think it's played by, like, Harvey Fierstien. He's very different from Weinstein. Like, I'm sure... I don't know anything about Feinstein. I don't want to say anything good or bad.
Doesn't come off well, though.
Yeah.
And then Daniel tries to kill Stuart.
Yes! He tries to, like, he goes from his boss to go put on the Mrs. Doubtfire outfit to go back to the family.
Mm-hmm.
And he sneaks into the kitchen and puts cayenne pepper into Stuart's meal, which has been established as he is allergic to. This is not shenanigans.
He pours it on this dish.
Yeah. This is not fun and games. This is legit assault.
Right? Attempted murder, right? If you have a food allergy.
Yeah. Which ultimately doing this action does cause his downfall.
Yes.
So, like,
thank God. But
yeah. So the movie is at least, like, somewhat aware. But, like, this isn't funny.
No.
This isn't like I'm not on Daniel's side at this point in the movie.
He is off the fucking rails. He's like, I'm going to kill this man. It's not like it's not like, he's lactose intolerant, so I'm going to make him have the runs later. No, he's like, I'm going to give you something you're actively really allergic to.
You're going to die. And of course, the way that this film depicts an allergy like that is a little unrealistic.
Yeah.
But it's functional for the film.
I'm just going to say his throat swells enough that the shrimp gets stuck, and he apparently doesn't chew his food.
Right. So Stuart starts to choke, and then
Miranda, because Mrs. Doubtfire is her friend and savior, calls from across the restaurant and says, Mrs. Doubtfire, help us, even though she's very far away.
Yes, because at this point, Daniel had messed up and shown up to boss's table in the Mrs. Doubtfire outfit because he's, drunk and was trying to juggle too much stuff. And then he tries to play it off like, oh, this is the host of your new show. It's fine.
It's the new character I'm playing.
And then, Miranda calls for Mrs. Doubtfire because it's already established earlier in the film that Mrs. Doubtfire is an expert in CPR and Heimlich maneuver. And this is when I guess this is Daniel's only growth moment. He actually has to decide to
save Stuart.
Right. Which he does. Because he's a good guy.
It's also, he's clearly not very good at the Heimlich. It looks really painful when he's doing it. Like, he's practically folding this poor guy in half as he, lifts him up. But I guess that's
a fun
to make
comedic
it,
moment.
I think it's also to make it look like it was very exerting so that his mask can fall off and it makes sense.
The mask falls off.
Yeah.
And then we've discovered, Daniel was Mrs. Doubtfire the whole time.
And
Miranda freaks the fuck out. Justifiably.
As she should.
Absolutely.
She should sue him for therapy fees for 10 years.
She just starts screaming, get the fuck out of here.
We're leaving. We have to leave. None of them have eaten any of their food, but she's like, we are going. We are not staying here.
Yep. This is when reality finally hits. And of course, after this, Stuart, still a goddamn champion. He's just like, oh yeah, thanks for saving my life, weirdo.
Yeah, it's like, he does not even fucking blink an eye, and he just
does not even blink at what's going on here. He's just like,
Miranda, and they leave. Yeah. And he's not a dick about it. He's not like, I paid for this food, or, but this is because there are many opportunities that he could have been an asshole, right?
Absolutely.
But she wants to leave, and so they leave.
Yep. And he doesn't even, he's just like, okay, turns out that Mrs. Doubtfire was the man the whole time. Okay, cool, whatever.
I like to imagine that he's standing there like, this is so easy. This is such an easy win for me.
Right.
I literally have to do nothing, and I am the good guy. All I have to do is not be a dick. It's so easy.
And he was also the good guy. He was the good guy the whole goddamn movie.
He was. And this is a message to most men. Just don't be a dick. There you go. You win. Yeah. You're already ahead of the game. So we smash cut to the courtroom where he has to face the consequences of his actions. It's a very small consequences.
Right. And he gives a quote heartfelt speech, which does not play well at all to me as a modern audience member. He's like, oh, but I love my kids and I'm just insane without my kids and blah, blah. What about what the kids need? Jackass.
Right? You have fucking traumatized them.
Yeah. And then we see a shot of Miranda and she's just like, oh, I fucked up. He loves his kids.
It's I know, and it's the worst. I'm like, no, you did not make her do this.
No, Miranda should not be regretting any of this at this point in the film.
We're talking
and I hate that the film did that.
Same. We're talking restraint orders and prison, maybe, right? He's at least committing some sort of fraud because he's being paid somehow to be Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah.
Right? Working without a social security number.
Yeah. And I remembered, having watched this film as a kid, I remembered, the courtroom scene is where, the audience and Daniel get a dressing down of all the things that he did wrong. But now I'm watching it now, I'm like, oh no, that's not what happens at all. But that's what should have happened. There should have been an indictment of the audience for enjoying, there should have been oh, you enjoyed Daniel's entire journey. You are complicit in this as much as Daniel is, as the audience, and you should feel bad.
Yeah.
That's not what happened. Instead, it was just oh, you lost, here's the consequences for your actions. Okay, bye.
Supervised visits. I do feel at least the judge is the only person who says this was real messed up. But they even say, I recommend psychological treatment, right? Mm-hmm. And what I'm wondering is it psychological treatment because of this trick that he played on this family, or is it psychological treatment because he wants to be dressed as a woman? And that's the interpretation.
Yeah.
Right?
There's certainly layers was made worse by that, right?
So. Yeah, how could you possibly trick people into thinking you're a 65-year-old woman?
Yeah. And then we have to continue feeling Miranda's guilt, which she feels unjustifiably. So like she should not feel guilty. And they're like, oh, I miss her. I miss the person that never existed. No, what you miss is a fucking parent who did the job of a goddamn parent.
Yep. You miss having a partner.
Right. Like the thing that Daniel always should have been.
Yes.
And never figured out.
And they they interview one nanny after this point, and she's very decidedly the opposite of Mrs. Doubtfire. She doesn't read stories. She doesn't do bathrooms. She doesn't whatever.
Right. Just contrast this with like, oh, actually, Daniel was a good guy.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, this woman doesn't like kids.
He was a manipulative, narcissistic asshole.
Yeah. I can't even.
You know, and then Mrs. Doubtfire shows up on TV, and they all run to see Mrs. Doubtfire because, like, oh my God, she's back! Yeah. You know, she's on TV. Gotcha.
Yeah, and even though she's not funny, and they should all be traumatized and still angry because this is what, like, the next day or 2 days later or something.
Who knows? So this is sometime
very later, soon after,
not too far. Yeah,
they're like all laughing and standing together, and they're like, "Oh, Mrs. Doubtfire."
Yeah,
and yeah.
And we go from there to a taping of an episode of the show that Mrs. Doubtfire is the host of. And Miranda shows up to this successful television show taping. And there's a final confrontation between Daniel and Miranda. Where Miranda's still painted as the bad guy.
Yeah, she is.
Like, what the hell?
Oh my God, right? And it's like aggressively painted as the bad guy. Right. Like he says, you took my kids away from me. Yeah, you took my kids away from me. You did nothing to stop the courts. I'm like, fuck no, I did nothing to stop the courts. Yeah. You impersonated a stranger and you invaded my house.
Right, you invaded my space and my personal life.
You spied on me.
You tried to control me.
You tried to intercept my relationship and sabotage it with a new person. Yep.
So even at the end of the movie, he still blames her for everything. He didn't learn a goddamn thing.
Nope. And
he doesn't grow at all.
He doesn't. He gets a successful show with a creep, you know, being the leader. And then she invites him to be the one to take the kids in the afternoons. He gets everything he wanted and pays no prices.
No price whatsoever. And like, even like she says the kids need him. Why? Why do the kids need? What the fuck does he bring to the goddamn table?
Yeah. They would be much better without him in their lives. They would be much better if he got hit by a train, like in O Brother Where Art Thou, and instead Stuart was their dad.
Yeah. This is not a happy ending.
It's not.
This is a what the fuck ending.
Yep. The only sort of almost growth / redemption that I kind of saw was when he goes to pick up the kids, he doesn't come in.
Yeah. Yes, he finally respects her space.
Yes, I'll stay out here. Because she invites him in and he says no.
Yeah, but only after he got what he wanted.
Yeah. Like now that I've stolen everything that I wanted from you by force, I'll stay out here until you deliver it to me.
Guilted you.
But it's a little bit. It's a tiny, tiny bit.
Finally, we have a closing talk from Mrs. Doubtfire, the character on the show, where they talk about parents who are separated.
Yep.
And like, I feel like this is like the most like whatever honest, realistic that this movie gets, where they're just like, you know, sometimes the relationships just don't work out, and it's not your fault, you know. And it's like, fine, okay, I wish that was the movie I just fucking watched.
Right. Yeah, these are conversations he should have had with his own children and his wife, or his ex-wife, as it were, right? Because for a long time, he still tries to talk it's clear that he conveys to the children that it's the mother's fault. And also, you know, maybe they'll get back together. Because, you know, like little Natty is like, why don't you just apologize to mom? And he's like, I don't think that's going to work. And it's not like he takes no ownership, no responsibility.
Yeah, and in that scene, she actually starts to like lecture him on like, hey, maybe you're framing this the wrong way. Maybe you should think of her as a goddamn princess. Right? Yeah. Like Mara Wilson for the win. That line was completely ad-libbed.
Yep.
Like Mara Wilson came up with that line. Yeah.
Mara Wilson.
As a child, Mara Wilson came up with
emotionally intelligent and beautiful. Our new podcast slogan is "We love Mara Wilson."
Yeah, she's great.
Is it Mara or Mara?
Oh man, I don't know. It's M-A-R-A.
I'm so sorry, Mara.
No, I think it's Mara, but I don't know.
Either way, we love you. We just read a lot and we don't speak to humans.
Yeah, that's kind of like one of those situations where like you pronounce a word wrong because you've only ever read it, and then you find out you've been doing it wrong your whole life.
Yep. So, Mrs. Doubtfire.
That was Mrs. Doubtfire.
Divorce in the 90s, and how apparently, according to this article, they were planning a sequel where he actually helps another man do the same thing.
Oh, God.
See, he didn't learn.
He didn't learn a goddamn thing.
It worked for him. What is there to learn? You know? Oh, and they also were going to potentially release R-rated cuts of this movie with Robin Williams just being even more inappropriate. Right.
Which, if you know Robin Williams stand-up and improvisation, that kind of like Robin Williams, because he gets filthy. Yes, like in his stand-up, he's raunchy.
Yeah, which is perfectly okay for the right venue, right?
Right. But a story where a man invades the privacy of his ex-wife to take control of his children, maybe not the right venue for that.
No, it's really not.
Right.
Sally Fields wins because she gets to be with Stuart, a nice man who she's known for a really long time, who loves her kids and has a job that apparently pays very well because he can afford a mansion for funsies. And he's beautiful and he knows how to dive. And I mean, at the very least, I can say this about the movie. At least they don't get back together. I think. Yes.
So, like, from what I was reading, that the original version of the script ended like the current version. And then the studio execs came in and it's like, no, you got to have them come back together at the end. Because that was like the story they wanted to tell and the cultural attitudes towards divorce at the time.
That would have been so horrible.
Would have been horrible. And at least they realized that when they fired the writer, new writer came in, wrote it the way the studio execs wanted. And like they went, oh no, this is worse.
This is way worse.
So they went back to they rehired the original writer. It was like, thank God.
Yeah. I mean,
because that would have been awful if they had gotten back together. It was just
It's already bad enough that she quote unquote forgives him and feels bad.
Yeah.
About this, he's the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
And like she lets him take the kids. He is a terrible influence on them. He lies. He cheats. He has no boundaries. Yeah. And the narcissism thing.
Yeah. It's man.
So.
Kait, we've been talking about this for about 3 hours now.
We have.
I honestly thought there was no way we were going to talk about a goddamn Robin Williams comedy.
Yeah.
As long as we talked about True Fucking Lies.
Right? And in fact, when you suggested this movie, I thought to myself, oh, but I watched that so much as a kid. There's nothing problematic in that movie. I mean, I guess maybe the whole, like, pretending to be a woman thing. We'll see what happens. Because I even made a note to talk about my feelings about it before I watched it again. Because I remember it being really lighthearted and family focused. And I remember it had a happy ending, according to me. And I remember Robin Williams being the good guy. And he was just a victim of circumstances. That's what it felt like in my mind. He's the good guy.
Yeah, no, this film really, the only thing that made this film work was Robin Williams' charisma as an actor. Mm-hmm. And his comedic timing.
He is a great actor.
Which is why I don't think this film it wouldn't work if they ever tried to remake it, because I don't think this film works on any level without Robin Williams.
Nope.
Ultimately, it's hard for me to say, like, how salty are we about this film, Kait?
Ooh, that's a good question. What level of salt am I feeling?
Because I'm almost more salty about this film than I was about True Lies, because I actually have nostalgia for this film. Whereas True Lies, I did not. I never watched True Lies until recently. But this film, like, betrayed me
Yeah. True Lies is more objectively problematic, but this one hits closer to home for me because it hits themes that I had to live through, right? And it idealizes them. It idealizes the fun dad who's irresponsible, who fucks up his kids, right? Because those kids 10 years from now, they're not doing well, right? Yeah. They don't have any, well, hopefully Stuart helps, right? Maybe Stuart and Sally like have really great Christmas traditions and they, you know, they go to Aspen over the winter and they ride reindeer and they love each other so much. And they have all these really like nerdy, you know, things where they play Scrabble on Christmas Eve and little Natty's really good at it because they let her win and it's just beautiful. And they have like this really loving family and Stuart gets the thing that he needed that he was missing and Miranda gets the thing that he needed that he was missing. And then the girls actually learn what a good relationship looks like. And Chris learns not to think strippers are cool when you're 12 and everything turns out okay. But he's still in their life, right? He's always going to be an influence. And so it's hard to say. Being a child of divorce is hard. It really is.
Sure.
And so I'm with you. I might feel worse about this movie. Like I'm less angry and I'm more disappointed. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. So.
I mean, ultimately, comedies generally, as a rule, age poorly.
Yeah.
The jokes just like they get stale after a while. Like part of the nature of comedy is the newness and the freshness of it is what makes it work. What makes things funny is the way it surprises and titillates the brain. Right.
I also think comedy is always on the edge of social awareness.
Yeah.
Right. It's always pushing these limits. So if you're pushing the limits of something farther before you and now we've moved past them, the comedy is not going to be relevant. And in fact, will be the opposite because comedy is kind of our way of diving into topics that are uncomfortable.
Yes. I think ultimately it's still a fun performance to watch. I think Robin Williams, it's Robin Williams being Robin Williams in a role.
It's a fun movie.
It's worth watching. But I'm still fairly salty about it. I'm still like, man, with context, like watch this movie with context, you know. And think of it as how it reflected society at the time and think about how much different we are now.
Yeah.
And how far we've come.
Very true. Because this is a weird snapshot of what relationships were expected to be in the 90s, you know, and how women were expected to behave and what they were limited by.
Yeah.
Yeah, because she's even, like, Miranda's even painted as evil for considering Stuart. Right?
Right, which is way messed up.
Yeah, because he's a good guy and he actually really cares about her and her family. What else? Like, is she never allowed to be happy because she made the mistake of having children with a narcissist?
Is she not supposed to be attracted to this awesome guy?
Right? He's got, like, oh my gosh, the scene where Natty's like, your tummy looks different than my dad's. I was like, this is awesome!
Yeah, that's what it looks like when someone takes care of themselves.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So, I don't know. I would say I'm large flake salt. Maybe not a lot of salt, but the salt is very particular.
Right. Maybe like kind of sea salty. Kosher like salty.
Dried in the sun. And so it's got those really large, fragile flakes that makes pockets of salt in places. And you're like, oh, this bite's way too salty.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Kait, it's been wonderful talking to you about Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah. It's always wonderful. It's always wonderful talking to you, Matt.
And I'm definitely walking away with this with definitely a new lens on how I look at all of the things I used to watch from back then. The 90s were a crazy decade full of change. And like, sometimes it took a while for society to catch up. And certainly I need to revisit some nostalgia.
Right? I went into this idea for this podcast thinking we might be able to find a couple. I'm sure most things will probably be all right-ish. I'm thinking that I need to reassess that because I feel like we're in for a ride. I'm really excited, but also, wow. Like, I think I might want to do Forrest Gump next.
Yeah?
Because that is a movie I loved so much.
Oh.
Yeah. and was very special to me. So I'm like, all right, kill your darlings.
Oh, man. Yep. Let's do it. All right, I think that'll do it for this week. Thank you for joining us on MediumSalt. If you liked the episode or you just want more of us, check us out on MediumSalt.com or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And it really helps us out when you subscribe or rate. Just share us with your friends. We'll see you around.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks for joining us. Stay salty.
Okay. Stop recording. Or am I sure? Yeah.